The mind does not suffer because life changes. It suffers because it refuses to change with life. You were taught to hold on to what feels familiar, to protect old memories, old relationships, old identities, and old plans, as if keeping them alive could keep you safe. But if holding on brings peace, why does it make you feel so tired? Why does the past become heavier each time you try to carry it into the present? Why does the mind keep rebuilding yesterday, even when life has already moved on? The truth is, change is not your enemy. Resistance is the real source of pain. Buddhist wisdom teaches that everything is always moving. People change, feelings change, seasons change, the body changes, and even the person you believe you are is changing from moment to moment. Suffering begins when the mind says, "This must stay. This must not end. This must return to the way it was." Tonight, as you listen to these lessons, you will begin to see why the mind protects familiar pain, why new beginnings can feel like loss, and why control slowly becomes another kind of prison. Something inside you will start to soften, the fear of change will lose its grip, and the weight of holding on will begin to lift. You will understand that acceptance is not giving up. Letting go is not weakness, and moving forward does not mean betraying your past. When you stop fighting the movement of life, your mind becomes quieter, your heart becomes lighter, and the future no longer feels like a threat. You begin to move with change instead of being broken by it. And when you wake up tomorrow, you may see your life differently, calmer, freer, and no longer trapped inside a story that has already ended. This is not just another Buddhist teaching to help you relax. This is an invitation to understand why the mind suffers when it refuses change, and how peace begins the moment you stop asking life to remain the same. Are you ready? Let's begin. And so, before we speak about changing your life, we must face something deeper. Every real change asks an old version of you to disappear. This is where the mind becomes afraid, because it does not only fear losing what it has, it fears losing who it has been. There is a kind of death that happens many times before the body reaches its final day. It happens when a role ends, when a relationship changes, when a dream no longer fits, when the beliefs that once guided you begin to feel too small. Nothing may look different from the outside, yet something inside you knows that the person you used to be can no longer continue in the same way. This inner death is rarely spoken about. People celebrate beginnings, but they often ignore what must end before a beginning can become real. They tell you to move forward, become stronger, start again, and welcome the future. But they do not tell you that a part of your identity may resist every step. It may call the new path dangerous, even when the old path has already become painful. It may hold tightly to a familiar name, habit, wound, or story, because losing it feels like losing yourself. Buddhist wisdom teaches that the self is not a fixed object. What you call me is a collection of memories, thoughts, feelings, habits, desires, fears, and experiences that are always changing. You are not exactly the same person you were 10 years ago. You are not even exactly the same person you were yesterday. Your body has changed, your understanding has changed, your emotions have moved, and your view of life has been shaped by everything that has happened since then. Yet the mind creates a picture of who you are and begins treating that picture as permanent. It says, "This is my personality, this is what I believe, this is what people expect from me, this is what happened to me, this is the kind of life I have." Once this picture becomes familiar, the mind protects it, even when it creates suffering. This is why people sometimes remain trapped in identities they no longer enjoy. Someone may continue seeing themselves as the rejected child, even after becoming an adult surrounded by people who care. Another may continue living as the person who must always be strong, even when their heart is tired and needs help. Someone else may keep calling themselves a failure because of one painful season, although life has given them many chances to begin again. The identity survives because it is known. The mind often prefers a painful certainty to an unfamiliar possibility. It would rather know exactly how it will suffer than step into a future where it does not know who it will become. This does not mean the mind is foolish. It is trying to protect you. Identity creates a sense of order. It tells you where you belong, how to behave, what to expect, and how others may respond to you. Without this story, the world can feel uncertain. The mind wonders, if I am no longer this person, then who am I? If I stop carrying this pain, what will be left? If I no longer play this role, will anyone still need me? These questions can make change feel like danger. A person may want peace but remain attached to anger because anger has protected them for years. They may want love but continue expecting betrayal because suspicion once kept them alert. They may desire freedom but hold on to guilt because guilt has become proof that they are a good person who understands the past. The mind does not always resist healing because it loves suffering. Sometimes it resists because suffering has become part of its identity. A wound can slowly become a name. A disappointment can become a personality. A loss can become the center around which an entire life is built. After enough time, the person may no longer say, "I experienced pain." They begin to feel, "I am the pain." This is where suffering becomes deeper. Pain is something that moves through life, but identity tries to make it permanent. Pain says, "This hurts." Identity says, "This is who I am." Pain can soften with time, understanding, and care. But when pain becomes identity, letting it go can feel like betrayal. You may have seen this in people who repeat the same story for many years. The details remain alive because the story explains everything. It explains why they do not trust, why they do not try, why they remain distant, why they expect the worst, and why they avoid change. The story gives their suffering a structure. Without it, they might have to face a more frightening truth. The future is open, and they are responsible for how they meet it. This responsibility can feel heavy. It is easier to say, "I cannot change because this is who I am," than to admit, "I may be able to change, but I am afraid of what that will require." True change does not simply add a new habit to the old self. It often removes something the old self depends upon. Becoming peaceful may require giving up the need to win every argument. Becoming free may require releasing the approval of people who only accept the smaller version of you. Becoming honest may require ending the performance that once helped you belong. Becoming mature may require admitting that some of your strongest beliefs were built from fear. This is why transformation can feel like grief. Something is being lost. Even when the change is healthy, the mind may mourn the old identity because it carried you through a certain period of life. The version of you that stayed silent may have helped you survive a home where speaking was unsafe. The version that trusted no one may have protected you after betrayal. The version that worked without rest may have helped your family during difficult years. The version that pleased everyone may have kept you connected when you feared abandonment. These identities were not meaningless. They served a purpose. They helped you move through conditions you did not yet know how to face differently. But protection can become a prison when it continues long after the danger has passed. A coat that keeps you warm in winter becomes unbearable in summer. This does not make the coat bad. It simply means the season has changed. In the same way, an identity that once protected you may now prevent you from living fully. The mind suffers when it mistakes an old survival method for an eternal truth. Buddhist teachings invite you to look at identity without hatred. You do not need to attack the person you used to be. You do not need to feel ashamed of your old fears, habits, or choices. Shame only creates another identity to carry. It says, "I was wrong, so I must be a bad person." Wisdom says, "I acted from the understanding I had at that time. Now I can see more clearly." This gentle awareness is important because force creates resistance. When you try to destroy the old self with anger, the mind holds on more tightly. It feels threatened and begins defending its habits. But when you observe the old identity with compassion, you create space around it. You begin to see that it is a pattern, not your deepest nature. You may notice the pattern appearing in ordinary moments. Someone questions your decision and you feel the need to explain yourself. A loved one becomes distant and you immediately assume you are being abandoned. You make a mistake and the mind says you always ruin everything. You receive an opportunity, but an inner voice tells you that people like you do not succeed. These reactions may feel natural, but they are often the voice of an old identity trying to stay alive. It gathers evidence from the present to support a story formed in the past. It does not ask what is true now. It asks how the current moment can be used to prove what it already believes. This is why awareness is the beginning of freedom. You cannot release an identity you have never examined. The practice is not to ask only, "What am I feeling?" It is also to ask, "Who do I believe I must be in this moment?" Perhaps you believe you must be the one who never needs help. Perhaps you must be the victim who is never responsible. Perhaps you must be the wise person who cannot admit confusion. Perhaps you must be the successful one who cannot rest. Perhaps you must be the forgiving one who never sets boundaries. Every rigid identity comes with rules. These rules may operate silently, but they shape your entire life. The strong person must not cry. The good child must not disappoint the family. The successful person must never slow down. The spiritual person must never feel anger. The loyal partner must tolerate everything. The intelligent person must always have an answer. The generous person must never say no. The wounded person must never trust again. When life asks you to break one of these rules, the identity feels as if it is dying. Fear rises, even when the new behavior is healthier. A person who has always been needed may feel empty when their children become independent. They may say they want their children to grow, but inside they feel forgotten. Their suffering is not only about having less responsibility. It is about losing the identity of being the center of someone else's life. A person who has built their worth around work may feel lost after retirement. It is not simply that the job has ended. The job gave them status, routine, purpose, and proof that they mattered. Without it, they must discover a value that does not depend on performance. A person who has been angry for years may feel strangely weak when anger begins to fade. Anger gave them energy. It made them feel protected and morally certain. Peace may feel empty at first because it does not provide the same fire. This is one of the hidden difficulties of healing. Health can feel unfamiliar. Calm can feel suspicious. Freedom can feel lonely. The mind may return to suffering not because suffering is pleasant, but because suffering confirms the identity it understands. The Buddha taught that attachment is a source of suffering. Most people think attachment only means holding on to possessions, people, or outcomes. But one of the strongest attachments is the attachment to self-image. You may be attached to being seen as kind, intelligent, independent, misunderstood, unlucky, spiritual, powerful, helpless, or different. Even a positive identity can create pain when you become unable to act outside it. If you are attached to being kind, you may avoid necessary conflict. If you are attached to being independent, you may reject support. If you are attached to being intelligent, you may fear asking simple questions. If you are attached to being spiritual, you may hide ordinary human emotions. If you are attached to being strong, you may suffer alone. The problem is not kindness, independence, intelligence, spirituality, or strength. The problem begins when these qualities become cages instead of tools. A quality is flexible, an identity is rigid, a quality can respond to the moment. A rigid identity must protect itself in every situation. A truly kind person can sometimes say no. A truly strong person can admit pain. A truly intelligent person can say, "I do not know." A truly peaceful person can confront injustice without hatred. A truly independent person can receive help without losing dignity. When you understand this, you stop asking, "What kind of person am I supposed to be?" You begin asking, "What does this moment require from me?" This is a major shift. The first question protects identity. The second responds to life. Life does not remain still enough for a fixed identity. Each season asks for something different. There are times to speak and times to listen, times to hold on and times to release, times to lead and times to follow, times to work and times to rest, times to endure and times to walk away. Suffering grows when you insist on meeting every new season with the same old self. A seed cannot remain a seed and become a tree. It must lose its familiar form. The shell that once protected it must break. From the outside, this breaking may look like destruction, yet without it, growth cannot begin. Human transformation often follows the same pattern. The cracking of identity may feel like confusion, failure, or loss. You may no longer recognize yourself. The things that once motivated you may lose their power. Old friendships may feel different. Goals that once seemed important may begin to appear empty. This can be frightening, but it does not always mean something is wrong. Sometimes confusion is the space between an identity that has ended and one that has not yet formed. The mind wants to fill this space quickly. It searches for a new label, new role, new group, or new certainty. It feels uncomfortable without a clear answer to the question, "Who am I?" Buddhist wisdom suggests that you do not need to rush. The empty space is not a mistake. It is a place of possibility. When the old identity becomes quiet, you can begin seeing life without forcing every experience into the same story. You may discover that you are more than the role you performed, more than the mistake you made, more than the family you came from, more than the person who left you, more than the work you did, more than the beliefs you inherited, more than the praise or rejection you received. This does not mean you become nothing. It means you stop reducing yourself to one small description. A river remains a river, although its water is never the same. Its identity is not found in holding one shape forever. It is found in movement. When rocks appear, it moves around them. When the land becomes narrow, it becomes narrow. When the space opens, it spreads. It does not accuse itself of betrayal because it has changed form. The human mind, however, often believes consistency means remaining unchanged. It fears being called weak, false, confused, or disloyal. So it continues defending opinions it no longer believes, relationships that no longer nourish it, and habits that no longer fit. But changing your mind after gaining wisdom is not weakness. It is evidence that you are alive. A dead branch keeps its shape. A living branch bends with the wind. Many people remain loyal to an old identity because others depend on it. Families, friendships, workplaces, and communities often assign roles. One person becomes the helper. Another becomes the problem. One becomes the responsible one. Another becomes the quiet one. When someone tries to change, the entire system may resist. The helper who begins setting boundaries may be called selfish. The quiet person who starts speaking may be called difficult. The one who always forgave may be accused of becoming cold. The person who stops hiding their needs may be told they have changed. Sometimes this accusation is correct. You have changed. That is not always a reason to return. People who benefited from your lack of boundaries may not celebrate your growth. Those who understood how to control the old version of you may feel threatened by the new one. Their discomfort does not automatically mean your transformation is wrong. Still, change requires honesty. Not every new identity is freedom. Sometimes the mind escapes one cage and quickly builds another. A person who was always obedient may become harsh and call it independence. Someone who was wounded may become emotionally distant and call it peace. A person who once lacked confidence may become arrogant and call it self-respect. True transformation is not simply becoming the opposite of who you were. The opposite can still be controlled by the old identity. If your entire life is built around proving that you are no longer weak, weakness still controls you. If every decision is designed to show that you no longer care, the past still directs your behavior. If you become successful only to silence those who doubted you, their voices are still living inside your choices. Freedom is not reacting against the old self. Freedom is no longer being ruled by it. This is why quiet observation matters. Before making a change, ask what is moving you. Is it wisdom or revenge, clarity or fear, compassion or the need to prove something? Are you moving toward a fuller life, or are you running from an old wound? There is no need to judge the answer. The purpose is simply to see clearly. The old identity loses power when it is seen without disguise. You may begin noticing how often you introduce yourself through suffering. You may tell people what happened before telling them who you are now. You may enter each new relationship expecting old events to repeat. You may protect yourself from disappointment by refusing to hope. This does not make you weak. It shows that part of you is still living in an earlier moment. The body may be in the present, but identity can remain trapped in the past. It keeps responding to people who are no longer there and dangers that are no longer happening. It sees the face of the present, but hears the voice of yesterday. Healing begins when you gently tell the mind, "That happened, but it is not happening now." This sentence does not erase the past. It places the past where it belongs. It allows experience to become wisdom instead of identity. Wisdom remembers without remaining imprisoned. It carries the lesson, but releases the chain. The old self may fear that letting go means declaring the pain unimportant, but release does not deny what happened. A person can honor a loss without making grief their only home. They can remember betrayal without treating every new person as guilty. They can acknowledge failure without turning it into a final definition. The past can be part of your story without becoming the author of every new page. This is what it means for an identity to die before the body does. The death is not a violent destruction. It is the quiet ending of a false permanence. It is the realization that you do not have to continue performing a version of yourself simply because it once existed. You can thank the old identity for how it protected you. You can recognize the burden it carried. You can understand why it formed. Then you can let it rest. There is deep compassion in saying, "You helped me survive, but I no longer need you to control my life." At first, the mind may not trust this. It may bring back familiar reactions. It may tempt you to return to old roles, old arguments, and old fears. This does not mean you have failed. Identity does not disappear in one dramatic moment. It fades each time you choose awareness over habit. Each time you ask for help instead of pretending to be fine, the identity of constant strength becomes weaker. Each time you set a boundary without hatred, the identity of the endless pleaser loses control. Each time you accept a mistake without calling yourself a failure, the wounded identity loosens. Each time you enter a new situation without assuming the past will repeat, you give the present a chance to be different. Change becomes real through these small moments. You do not need to announce your transformation. A tree does not make a speech when it releases an old leaf. It simply stops feeding what has completed its purpose. In the same way, you can stop feeding old identities with repeated thoughts, defensive explanations, and familiar reactions. You do not need to fight them. You only need to stop treating them as commands. A thought may say, "You must prove yourself." You can hear it without obeying. A fear may say, "They will leave you." You can feel it without closing your heart. A memory may say, "Nothing ever changes." You can remember that you are already changing as you observe it. The space between a thought and your response is where the old identity begins to die and awareness begins to live. Buddhist practice does not ask you to create a perfect new self. Perfection would become another identity to defend. It asks you to see that every identity is temporary. Today you may be a parent, teacher, worker, caregiver, student, partner, leader, or seeker. These roles can be meaningful, but none of them contains the whole of you. Each will change. Some will end, others will begin. Peace comes from participating fully without believing that your existence depends on one role remaining forever. You can love without owning. You can serve without disappearing. You can succeed without making success your worth. You can grieve without becoming grief. You can change without hating who you were. This is the middle path between clinging and rejection. You do not cling to the old identity, and you do not attack it. You understand it, learn from it, and allow it to pass. Then something surprising happens. The loss of a fixed identity does not leave you empty in the way the mind feared. It leaves you open. You become able to meet people without forcing them into old categories. You can hear criticism without feeling that your entire being is under attack. You can experience failure without believing your life has lost value. You can receive praise without becoming dependent on it. The less tightly you hold an identity, the less easily the world can threaten you. When someone disagrees with you, a belief has been questioned, not your existence. When a role ends, a chapter has closed, not your life. When your body changes, your appearance has shifted, not your deepest capacity for awareness and compassion. This freedom does not make you passive. It makes you adaptable. You can respond wisely because you are no longer spending all your energy protecting an image. Many arguments continue because people are defending who they believe they are. They do not listen to understand. They listen for danger. Every disagreement feels like an attempt to erase them. But when identity becomes lighter, conversation becomes easier. You can admit that another person has a point. You can apologize without feeling destroyed. You can change direction without feeling humiliated. You can leave situations that no longer fit without needing to make everyone wrong. This is inner strength. It does not come from building a harder identity. It comes from needing less protection. One day, the body itself will change beyond your control. Age will alter your appearance, energy, abilities, and place in the world. If your peace depends on remaining physically strong, socially important, attractive, productive, or admired, every natural change will feel like theft. But when you have practiced releasing identities throughout life, aging becomes less frightening. You have already learned that endings do not erase your value. You have watched many versions of yourself arise and pass away. The child disappeared into the young adult. The young adult became someone older. Beliefs changed. Dreams changed, relationships changed, yet awareness continued witnessing each season. The person you were has already died many times, but life has continued. This is not a reason for sadness. It is evidence that change has been carrying you all along. You survived the loss of identities you once thought were permanent. You survived being the person who did not know what you now understand. You survived homes, friendships, jobs, hopes, and fears that no longer exist in the same form. The mind says, if I change, I will lose myself. Life answers, you have been changing from the beginning. The real suffering is not that the old identity dies. The suffering comes from trying to keep it alive after its season has ended. When you stop forcing the old self to continue, energy returns. The effort once used to protect an outdated story becomes available for living. You feel less divided. You no longer have to pretend that you want what you have outgrown. You no longer need to defend choices that your heart knows are complete. You can stand in the present without dragging every former version of yourself behind you. This does not happen through one decision. It becomes a daily practice of noticing, softening, and releasing. Ask yourself quietly, what identity am I protecting today? What would happen if I did not have to defend it? What truth have I already understood but refused to live? The answers may be uncomfortable, but discomfort is not always danger. Sometimes it is the old identity realizing that it can no longer rule you. Let it tremble. Let it speak. Let it remind you of everything it fears. Then return to the present and take one honest step. You do not need to know the final shape of the person you are becoming. A flower does not need to understand its future before opening. It responds to light when light arrives. Your task is not to create a permanent identity that will never change again. Your task is to become awake enough to change without abandoning your values, compassionate enough to release the past without hatred, and courageous enough to let life show you what must come next. The identity that dies before the body does is not your true life disappearing. It is the narrow story of who you thought you had to be coming to an end. And beneath that story, something quieter remains. Awareness remains. The ability to learn remains. The capacity to love remains. The possibility of choosing again remains. When you understand this, change no longer feels like complete destruction. It becomes a doorway. One version of you steps toward it, but another version may be the one that walks through. The mind may grieve at the doorway because it cannot carry everything forward. Some beliefs must be left behind. Some roles must be released. Some wounds must no longer be used as names. Some relationships must be allowed to change. Some dreams must end so that life can reveal a direction you could not see before. This grief deserves patience. Do not rush yourself, but do not build a home inside hesitation. Bow to what is ending. Thank it for what it taught you. Then allow the old identity to become part of your wisdom instead of the ruler of your future. Because once you see that identity itself is always changing, another hidden truth begins to appear. The mind does not only protect who it believes you are, it also protects the pain it already understands, and that familiar pain may become the next thing you are afraid to release. And once the old identity begins to loosen, the mind faces an even more difficult question. If you are no longer required to remain the person your pain created, why does part of you still return to the same wound? Why does the mind revisit what hurt, repeat the same fears, and protect the very suffering it says it wants to escape? The answer is uncomfortable but deeply human. The mind does not always protect pain because it enjoys suffering. It protects pain because pain that is understood can feel safer than peace that is unfamiliar. A familiar wound has a shape. You know where. It begins, what thoughts it produces, how it changes your mood, and what you usually do when it appears. Even if it hurts, it does not surprise you anymore. You have learned its language. You know the memories it will bring, the fears it will awaken, and the story it will tell about your life. The unknown is different. The unknown offers no clear instructions. It asks you to move without certainty. It asks you to live without the pain that once explained your choices. It asks you to discover who you are when you are no longer fighting the same battle. This is why people sometimes remain emotionally attached to suffering long after the original event has ended. The pain has become familiar territory. It may be dark, but the mind knows the path. Healing, on the other hand, can feel like entering an open field without a map. The mind is built to notice danger and remember what caused it. This helped human beings survive. If something brought pain before, the mind records it. It watches for similar signs and prepares the body to respond. This protective system is useful when danger is present. The problem begins when the mind continues reacting as if the past is still happening. A person who was betrayed may become highly alert to small changes in another person's voice. A delayed reply may feel like rejection. A quiet mood may feel like hidden dishonesty. A simple disagreement may awaken the fear that love is ending. The present moment may be harmless, but the mind is not only looking at the present, it is comparing it with an old experience. It asks, does this resemble what hurt me before? If the answer appears to be yes, fear arrives before understanding has time to speak. This is how the mind protects known pain. It keeps the wound close so it can use it as a warning system. The problem is that a warning repeated too often becomes a prison. What was meant to prevent suffering begins creating it. The person may avoid closeness to prevent betrayal, but the distance produces loneliness. They may avoid opportunities to prevent failure, but the avoidance produces regret. They may refuse to trust anyone to avoid disappointment, but the refusal prevents real connection. The mind then points to the loneliness, regret, or distance as proof that its fear was correct. It says, see, the world is unsafe. It does not notice that its own protection helped create the result. This does not happen because the person is weak. It happens because the mind prefers patterns it can predict. Predictability creates a sense of control, even when the pattern is painful. A known disappointment can feel easier to manage than an uncertain hope. A person may choose relationships with emotionally unavailable people because they already understand the feeling of being neglected. They know how to chase, wait, overthink, and feel unwanted. A healthy relationship may feel confusing because it does not activate the same familiar struggle. Instead of feeling safe, steady love may feel suspicious. The person may wonder why there is no emotional storm. They may mistake peace for boredom because their mind learned to connect intensity with love. This is one of the ways pain hides. It does not always appear as sadness. Sometimes it appears as preference. A person says, this is just the kind of person I am attracted to. But beneath the attraction may be a familiar emotional pattern searching for another chance to repeat itself. The mind often repeats old pain because repetition creates the illusion that the ending can finally be changed. It quietly returns to similar situations, hoping that this time it will receive the love, apology, recognition, or justice it did not receive before. Someone who grew up feeling ignored may repeatedly seek approval from people who are difficult to please. They may believe they are simply ambitious or loyal, but part of the mind is trying to repair an older wound. It hopes that if one distant person finally chooses them, the original rejection will lose its power. Someone who was constantly criticized may become attached to proving themselves. Every achievement becomes an argument with voices from the past. They work harder, accomplish more, and still feel unfinished because the real goal is not success. The hidden goal is to return to an earlier moment and finally be declared worthy. But the past cannot be repaired by repeating it with different people. You cannot force a new person to complete what another person refused to give. You cannot gather enough praise today to make yesterday's humiliation disappear. You cannot win enough arguments in the present to undo the moment when your voice was ignored. What can change is your relationship with the pain. You can stop sending your present life into the past, too. Negotiate with something that has already happened. This is difficult because understood pain provides meaning. It creates a clear explanation for your emotions. You know why you are afraid, why you keep your distance, and why you expect disappointment. The wound gives your suffering a reason. Without that explanation, you may feel exposed. You may have to accept that life is no longer being controlled by the original event. You may have to choose what happens next. Choice can feel more frightening than pain because choice brings responsibility. As long as the wound controls your life, every reaction can be blamed on what happened. Once you begin healing, you must decide how you will speak, whom you will trust, what boundaries you will create, and what future you will build. The mind may prefer helplessness because helplessness removes the burden of uncertainty. It says, "I cannot do anything because this is what pain made me." This belief hurts, but it also protects the person from the fear of trying. Trying creates the possibility of failure. Hope creates the possibility of disappointment. Love creates the possibility of loss. Healing does not remove these possibilities. It teaches you that you can meet them without abandoning yourself. The mind often misunderstands this. It believes the safest life is the life with the fewest risks. But a life built only around avoiding pain slowly becomes too small. You stop saying what you feel because honesty may create conflict. You stop beginning new things because effort may end in failure. You stop meeting people because connection may lead to loss. You stop dreaming because hope may hurt. The walls become stronger, but the life inside them becomes weaker. Buddhist wisdom does not promise a world without pain. It teaches a different relationship with pain. It shows that pain is part of human experience, but the mind creates additional suffering when it clings to pain, fights it, identifies with it, or uses it to predict every future moment. Pain says, "Something difficult happened." The protecting mind says, "It will always happen." Pain says, "This person hurt me." The protecting mind says, "People cannot be trusted." Pain says, "I failed once." The protecting mind says, "I am a failure." Pain describes an experience. Fear turns the experience into a permanent law. Once that law is formed, the mind begins searching for evidence to support it. It notices every broken promise and overlooks every act of loyalty. It remembers every rejection and minimizes every moment of acceptance. It studies failure closely, but treats success as luck. The mind is not doing this to punish you. It is trying to keep its world understandable. A belief feels safer when everything appears to confirm it. This is why painful beliefs can survive even when life offers evidence against them. If you believe you are unlovable, genuine care may feel uncomfortable. You may question the other person's motives, focus on their smallest mistake, or create distance until the relationship begins to weaken. When it finally becomes painful, the mind feels strangely certain again. It says, "I knew this would happen." Certainty has returned, but peace has been lost. This pattern is not always obvious. It may look like caution, high standards, independence, or realism. The person may proudly say they expect nothing from anyone. They may believe this protects them from disappointment. But expecting nothing can also prevent gratitude, trust, and emotional closeness. It reduces the risk of being surprised by pain, but it also reduces the possibility of being surprised by kindness. The mind protects pain through repetition, but it also protects it through memory. Painful memories often return with greater emotional force than ordinary memories. The mind replays conversations, missed opportunities, humiliations, betrayals, and losses because it is searching for information. It asks, "What did I miss? What should I have seen? What could I have done differently?" At first, this reflection may offer useful lessons, but after the lesson has been understood, the mind may continue repeating the scene. It no longer learns, it circles. This is rumination. It feels like problem solving, but it often keeps the nervous system tied to an event that cannot be changed. The mind believes that enough thinking will produce control. It does not want to accept that some questions have no satisfying answer. Why did they leave? Why did they choose someone else? Why was I treated unfairly? Why did this happen at that moment? Why did I not see it sooner? Sometimes an answer exists, sometimes it does not. Even when an answer is found, it may not create the peace the mind expected. Knowledge cannot always remove grief. Explanation cannot always restore trust. Understanding another person's reasons cannot always heal what their actions changed. At some point, the search for an answer becomes another way of refusing to release the pain. The mind says, "I will let go when I understand everything." But life rarely gives complete explanations. People act from confusion, fear, selfishness, weakness, and desires they do not fully understand themselves. Waiting for perfect understanding can keep you emotionally attached to someone who has already left your life. Acceptance begins when you say, "I may never receive the answer I wanted, but I will not give this unanswered question the rest of my life." This is not surrender to injustice. It is a refusal to keep harming yourself while waiting for the past to become fair. The mind also protects pain because pain can create connection. In some families and communities, suffering is the main language people share. Conversations are built around complaints, disappointment, illness, betrayal, and fear. When someone begins to heal, they may feel separated from the group. They may be accused of forgetting where they came from. Their hope may be called foolish. Their new boundaries may be described as pride. Their decision to stop discussing old wounds may be seen as coldness. The person then faces a painful choice. They can continue carrying the familiar suffering and remain connected, or they can change and risk feeling alone. This is why healing can disturb relationships. People do not only relate to who you are, they relate to the role your pain plays in their lives. Perhaps you were the person who always listened to everyone's problems. Perhaps your lack of boundaries made others comfortable. Perhaps your fear made you easy to control. Perhaps your guilt kept you available. When these patterns change, some people may try to awaken the old pain again because the old version of you was more useful to them. The mind may return to familiar suffering to avoid losing belonging. This is especially powerful when pain has been inherited. A child may grow up hearing that life is dangerous, people are selfish, money never lasts, love always ends, and dreams are for foolish people. These beliefs may be presented as wisdom because they were formed through real hardship. The child absorbs them before having enough experience to question them. Later, when life offers something different, they may feel guilty for accepting it. Peace may feel like disloyalty to those who suffered before them. A person may unconsciously believe, "How can I be happy when my family was never happy? How can I live freely when those before me had no freedom? How can I rest when everyone I knew had to struggle?" The mind protects inherited pain because it mistakes suffering for loyalty. But repeating another person's suffering does not honor them. If someone endured a hard life so that you could have more choices, using those choices is not betrayal. Healing can become a way of respecting what they survived. You do not honor a wounded family by creating the same wounds in the next generation. You honor them by ending what they could not end. This may require you to question beliefs that once felt sacred. It may require you to see that some advice was fear wearing the voice of experience. The people who taught you may have loved you deeply, but love does not make every belief correct. They gave you what they understood. You are allowed to understand more. The mind also protects pain through the body. Emotional patterns do not live only in thoughts. They can appear as tight shoulders, shallow breathing, a tense stomach, a racing heart, or constant tiredness. The body learns what to expect. If you have lived in stress for a long time, calm may initially feel uncomfortable. Silence may feel too empty. Rest may produce guilt. A peaceful day may make you anxious because the body has learned to prepare for trouble. You may find yourself searching for something to worry about. You may create unnecessary tasks, reopen old conversations, or check repeatedly for bad news. The body is trying to return to the level of tension it understands. This is why healing cannot always happen through thought alone. You may know that you are safe, yet your body may still be waiting for danger. Gentle practices help the body learn a new experience. Slow breathing, mindful walking, quiet observation, regular rest, and simple routines can teach the nervous system that stillness does not always mean something bad is about to happen. The goal is not to force calm. Force creates another struggle. The goal is to remain present long enough for the body to discover that peace can be survived. At first, this may sound strange. Why would anyone need to learn how to survive peace? Because peace removes distractions. It allows emotions that were hidden beneath constant activity to rise. Some people remain busy because stopping would bring them face to face with grief. They work, help others, scroll, clean, plan, talk, and solve problems. Every action keeps the inner room noisy. When stillness finally arrives, sadness may appear. The person then decides that rest is dangerous and returns to activity. But the sadness did not come from the stillness. The stillness only revealed what had been waiting underneath. The mind protects pain by keeping it hidden, but hidden pain does not disappear. It quietly shapes decisions. It chooses relationships, creates reactions, and controls behavior without being named. Allowing pain to be felt is different from allowing pain to rule you. To feel pain means giving it honest attention without turning it into your entire identity. You notice where it lives in the body. You name the emotion. You acknowledge what was lost. You allow tears, anger, fear, or disappointment to move without building a permanent story around them. The mind often fears that if it allows pain in, the pain will never end, so it keeps the door closed. But the locked door requires constant guarding. Emotions that are allowed to move often change. They rise, reach a peak, soften, and pass. Emotions that are resisted can remain active beneath the surface because the mind never completes the experience. This does not mean every deep wound disappears quickly. Some losses return in waves. Some pain needs time, support, and patient care. Buddhist acceptance is not a demand to heal on a schedule. It is the willingness to stop adding resistance to what is already present. You may say, sadness is here, rather than, I should not be sad. You may say, fear is moving through me, rather than, I am weak for feeling afraid. You may say, this memory hurts, rather than, I will never be free. This language creates space. It separates the experience from the self. Pain is present, but it is not the whole of you. The mind protects pain by making it personal. It asks, why is this happening to me? The question can quickly become an accusation against life. It creates the feeling that pain is proof of unfairness, punishment, or personal failure. A more useful question is, what is this experience asking me to understand? This does not mean every painful event contains a hidden blessing. Some events are simply tragic, unfair, or unnecessary. Wisdom does not decorate suffering with false beauty. But even when an event has no good reason, your response can still contain meaning. You can learn what must be protected, what must be released, what boundaries are needed, and what values deserve to guide your next step. Meaning is not found by pretending the pain was good. Meaning is created by refusing to let pain have the final word. The mind may also hold pain because anger feels stronger than grief. Anger creates movement. It gives the body energy and the mind a clear target. Grief is softer and more vulnerable. It admits that something mattered and cannot be restored in the same way. A person may remain angry for years because beneath the anger is a sadness they are afraid to feel. The anger says, "They were wrong." The grief says, "I loved what I lost." Both may be true, but grief requires surrender. It accepts that the event happened and cannot be argued out of existence. This is why forgiveness is often misunderstood. Forgiveness does not mean calling harmful behavior acceptable. It does not require renewed closeness. It does not remove consequences or boundaries. Forgiveness, in its deepest form, means releasing the demand that the past become different before you permit yourself to live. You may never trust that person again. You may never speak to them again. You may still recognize the damage clearly, but you no longer allow the event to occupy every inner room. Forgiveness is not always a feeling of warmth. Sometimes it is simply the decision to stop carrying the same argument through every day of your future. The mind may resist because pain can feel like justice. It believes that remaining wounded proves the event mattered. Letting go may seem like allowing the person who caused harm to escape responsibility. But your continued suffering does not punish someone who is no longer present. It only extends the effect of what they did. Justice and inner freedom are separate matters. You can seek accountability while protecting your peace. You can remember what happened without reopening the wound every morning. The mind also protects pain because it fears being hurt again. It believes that healing will make you careless. It says, "Do not forget, do not soften, do not trust. You need this pain to remain alert." But wisdom and pain are not the same thing. You can keep the lesson without keeping the wound open. A scar remembers, but it does not continue bleeding. It shows that something happened and that the body found a way to close around it. Emotional healing can work in a similar way. The memory remains, but it no longer controls every response. You remember the signs you ignored. You become clearer about your boundaries. You learn to trust slowly. You pay attention without living in constant fear. The mind once believed pain was the only teacher. Eventually, awareness can take its place. Awareness does not need panic to notice danger. It does not need suspicion to observe behavior. It does not need anger to set a boundary. It sees clearly and responds without carrying every old wound into the new moment. To reach this point, you must become curious about your protection. Instead of asking, "Why can I not let go?" ask, "What does my mind believe this pain is doing for me?" Perhaps it protects you from closeness. Perhaps it gives you a reason not to try. Perhaps it keeps you connected to someone who is gone. Perhaps it helps you feel morally right. Perhaps it protects you from admitting regret. Perhaps it gives you a familiar identity. Perhaps it allows you to avoid a difficult decision. The answer should not be used to shame yourself. Protection formed for a reason. The mind was trying to help with the tools it had. You can thank the protection without continuing to obey it. You can say, "I understand why I learned to expect the worst. It helped me prepare when life was unstable, but I do not need to turn every peaceful moment into a warning." You can say, "I understand why I stopped trusting. Trust once brought pain, but I can now learn to trust with awareness rather than giving everyone complete access." You can say, "I understand why I hold on to anger. It made me feel less helpless, but I can protect myself with boundaries instead of carrying this fire." This is how compassion changes the pattern. Harshness tells the mind to stop being afraid. Compassion asks what the fear needs in order to soften. Sometimes it needs evidence. The mind must experience small moments of safety before it can believe in a different life. A person who fears rejection may practice expressing one honest need to someone trustworthy. A person who fears failure may begin one small task without demanding perfection. A person who fears rest may sit quietly for 5 minutes and allow guilt to rise without obeying it. These moments look small, but they teach the mind something new. They show that the future does not have to repeat the past exactly. Healing becomes possible when the mind gathers new experiences strong enough to challenge the old law. This takes patience. The mind may understand a lesson before the emotions are ready to follow. You may know that a relationship has ended, yet still reach for the phone. You may know that you are worthy, yet still feel fear when speaking. You may know that rest is necessary, yet still feel guilty when you stop. Understanding is the beginning, not the completion. Do not use the return of old feelings as proof that nothing has changed. A familiar thought may appear because it has traveled the same path many times. Each time you respond differently, the path becomes weaker. The goal is not to prevent every old reaction. The goal is to stop building your life around it. Fear may say, run. You can pause. Pain may say, close your heart. You can choose careful openness. Memory may say, this will end badly. You can look at what is actually happening now. The mind becomes free not when pain never speaks again, but when pain is no longer the only voice you trust. There is a quiet courage in allowing happiness after suffering. Many people think courage is only needed to face hardship, but courage is also needed to accept a good life when pain has trained you to expect loss. You may need courage to enjoy a peaceful relationship without searching for hidden danger. You may need courage to receive kindness without questioning whether you deserve it. You may need courage to rest without proving that you have earned it. Pleasure can feel vulnerable because it gives life something to take away. The mind thinks, if I do not become attached to this, losing it will hurt less. So it refuses to be fully present even during good moments. But avoiding joy does not protect you from grief. It only causes you to lose the good moment before it has even ended. Buddhist wisdom teaches presence because presence does not demand permanence. You can receive a beautiful moment while knowing it will change. You do not need to reject it because it cannot last forever. A flower does not become worthless because it fades. A conversation does not become meaningless because it ends. A season of happiness does not become a mistake because sorrow may one day return. When the mind stops demanding guarantees, it becomes able to experience life directly. This is the freedom the protecting mind has been searching for. It thought freedom meant never being hurt again, but such freedom does not exist in a changing world. Real freedom is knowing that pain can come without becoming your permanent home. You can lose without losing your entire self. You can be disappointed without becoming hopeless. You can be betrayed without treating everyone as guilty. You can fail without turning one result into your identity. The mind does not need to protect pain forever once it learns that you can meet life with awareness. The pain you understand may continue calling you back because it is familiar. It may sound convincing. It may remind you of every reason not to move. But familiar does not mean true, and understood does not mean necessary. You are allowed to leave the inner room where you learned to survive. You are allowed to step into a life that feels strange because it is peaceful. You are allowed to become unfamiliar to your own suffering. At first, healing may feel empty because the old struggle occupied so much space. Do not rush to fill that space with another wound. Let the emptiness remain open. In that openness, new qualities can grow. Patience can replace panic. Discernment can replace suspicion. Boundaries can replace resentment. Self-respect can replace the endless search for approval. The mind slowly discovers that it no longer needs pain to remain safe, and when that discovery becomes real, another hidden grief begins to rise. Every new beginning asks you to step away from something known, even when what you are leaving was painful. Beneath excitement, hope, and possibility, there is often a quiet sadness for the life that can no longer continue. And when the mind finally begins to release the pain it once used for protection, another feeling often appears beneath the relief. It is quiet, difficult to explain, and easy to mistake for doubt. You may be stepping towards something better, yet part of you still feels heavy. You may know the old life was no longer right, yet leaving it behind can still hurt. This is the grief hidden inside every new beginning. Most people believe grief belongs only to death, separation, or obvious loss. They expect it when someone leaves, when a relationship ends, when a home is lost, or when a dream collapses. But grief can also appear when something good begins. It can rise when you move to a better place, enter a healthier relationship, start a new career, recover from a painful season, or finally become the person you worked hard to be. The beginning may be beautiful, but it still closes a door. Something must be left behind. A routine ends. A role changes. A familiar place becomes a memory. A version of you can no longer continue in the same way. Even when you're ready to move forward, the heart may still turn around and look at what is disappearing. This does not mean the new path is wrong. It means the old path mattered. The mind often becomes confused by this mixture of hope and sadness. It believes that if the change is good, you should feel only happiness. If you feel grief, it begins asking whether you made a mistake. It says, "Why am I sad when this is what I wanted? Why do I miss something that caused me pain? Why do I feel empty when life is finally improving?" These questions can make a natural emotional response feel like a problem. Buddhist wisdom teaches that human experience is rarely made of one feeling at a time. Joy and sorrow can exist together. Relief can stand beside loneliness. Gratitude can live beside fear. You can welcome the future while mourning the past. The heart is wide enough to hold both. A new beginning does not erase what came before it. It carries traces of every choice, relationship, hope, and disappointment that brought you to the doorway. When you step through, you do not become a person without history. You become someone whose history is changing meaning. This change of meaning is often painful. An experience that once felt permanent becomes something that ended. A place that once felt like home becomes somewhere you used to live. A person who once shaped your daily life becomes someone you remember. A dream that once guided you becomes a lesson rather than a destination. The event may not be tragic, but the shift is real. The mind must reorganize its understanding of your life. This is why even positive change can feel tiring. The mind is not only learning something new, it is also releasing thousands of small expectations connected to the old. Life. When a person begins a new job, they do not only learn new duties. They leave behind familiar faces, repeated conversations, known routines, and the comfort of already understanding their place. They may be excited about the opportunity and still miss the old desk, the old journey, or the people they once saw every morning. When someone moves to a new home, they do not only carry furniture, they leave behind the sound of a certain door, the way light entered a particular room, the road they knew without thinking, and the small memories attached to ordinary corners. When a child grows older, a parent may feel proud and heartbroken at the same time. The child is becoming independent, which is what love prepared them to do. Yet independence changes the parent's role. The little person who once needed constant care begins building a life beyond the parent's reach. Nothing has gone wrong. Life is unfolding. Still, something precious is ending. The invisible grief of beginnings often comes from the loss of what could have been. When you choose one direction, you close the door on other possibilities. Every serious decision creates an unlived life. You may marry one person and quietly release every future you might have had with someone else. You may choose one profession and leave behind other talents that could have been developed. You may move to another city and lose the life that might have grown in the place you left. You may say yes to one responsibility and accept that you cannot give the same time to another dream. These unlived lives do not need to be better than the life you chose. They only need to have been possible. The mind can grieve possibility because possibility carries no disappointments. What never happened remains untouched by reality. It can appear perfect because it was never tested. A person may begin a fulfilling new path and still wonder about the road not taken. This does not always mean they regret the decision. It means choice has weight. Modern life often teaches people to treat every decision as if it can be reversed without cost. But time moves in one direction. Some choices shape years. Some doors close quietly while you are walking through another. Buddhist understanding does not ask you to avoid decisions because of this. It asks you to make them with awareness. When you recognize that every choice includes a form of loss, you stop demanding that a decision feel completely painless. You can choose with courage while allowing grief to be present. The hidden grief of a beginning can also come from losing the struggle that gave your life structure. This may sound strange because struggle is something people usually want to escape. Yet a long struggle creates routines, identities, relationships, and daily purposes. A person recovering from illness may feel grateful for improving health, but they may also feel uncertain without the appointments, treatments, and constant focus on survival. Their days were once organized around getting better. When the crisis ends, they must discover what living is for beyond recovery. Someone who leaves a difficult relationship may feel relief, but the silence afterward can feel painful. The arguments have ended, but so have the messages, routines, shared meals, familiar jokes, and the hope that one day the relationship might become what they wanted. The person may not miss the harm. They may miss the bond, the dream, or the person they hoped their partner would become. This distinction is important. Missing something does not always mean you should return to it. The mind often treats longing as instruction. It says, you miss it, so it must belong in your life. But longing only proves that something left an emotional mark. It does not prove that it was healthy, safe, or meant to continue. You can miss a person and still understand why distance is necessary. You can mourn a place and still know you have outgrown it. You can remember a former version of yourself with tenderness and still refuse to become that person again. Grief is not always a request to go backward. Sometimes it is the heart acknowledging that moving forward has a cost. This cost may include the loss of belonging. Every community has spoken and unspoken rules. People learn how to behave, what to value, what not to question, and which version of themselves will be accepted. When you begin changing, you may no longer fit the place that once gave you identity. Your growth can create distance before it creates new connection. You may stop enjoying conversations built around gossip, fear, or complaint. You may begin questioning beliefs your family never questioned. You may set boundaries in relationships where endless availability was expected. You may want a life that people close to. You do not understand. The new beginning feels right, but it can also feel lonely. You are no longer fully at home in the old world, yet you have not built a new world around yourself. This middle space can be one of the most painful parts of transformation. The mind may interpret the loneliness as proof that change was a mistake. It may tempt you to become smaller again so that you can return to familiar belonging. You may find yourself hiding new interests, softening your truth, or pretending to agree just to feel close to people you love. But belonging that requires self-abandonment creates another form of grief. You remain connected to others while becoming distant from yourself. Buddhist wisdom values compassion, but compassion does not mean refusing to grow so that others remain comfortable. You can love people without allowing their fear of change to control your life. You can honor where you came from without remaining trapped there. Sometimes love must learn a new shape. A parent may need to love an adult child without controlling their decisions. Friends may need to remain connected without sharing every belief. A family may need to accept that one member is choosing a different path. A person may need to care deeply while creating healthy distance. These changes can feel like loss because the old form of the relationship is dying. Yet the death of an old form does not always mean the death of love. Love can remain while roles change. Respect can remain while distance grows. Gratitude can remain even when a chapter closes. The hidden grief of new beginnings is often made worse by the pressure to appear grateful. People may say, "You should be happy. This is what you wanted. Others would love to have this opportunity. Why are you looking back?" These words may be intended to encourage, but they can make someone feel ashamed of a natural response. Gratitude and grief are not enemies. You can be grateful for a new home and still miss the old neighborhood. You can love your new life and still ache for a time that has passed. You can be proud of your growth and still feel tenderness for the person you used to be. Real gratitude does not demand emotional dishonesty. It does not force the heart to erase loss. It allows you to receive what is arriving while respecting what is leaving. The mind also grieves the loss of certainty. Even when the old situation was painful, you knew how to survive it. The new beginning asks for skills you may not yet have. A person leaving a familiar career may know exactly how to perform the old work. In the new field, they become a beginner again. Their confidence may disappear. They may feel clumsy, slow, or exposed. Someone entering a healthy relationship after years of instability may not know how to receive calm communication. They may understand conflict better than closeness. They may know how to repair damage, but not how to live without constant damage. A person beginning a peaceful life may discover that peace requires new habits. They must learn to rest, trust, speak honestly, make decisions without panic, and accept days that are not filled with crisis. The loss of competence can create grief. You were skilled at surviving the old life. Now you must become a student of the new one. This is humbling. The mind prefers mastery because mastery feels safe. Beginning again means making mistakes, asking questions, and admitting what you do not know. Many people remain in situations they have outgrown because they would rather feel capable in suffering than inexperienced in freedom. They know how to endure. They do not yet know how to receive. They know how to fight. They do not yet know how to soften. They know how to please. They do not yet know how to choose. They know how to stay busy. They do not yet know how to be still. This is why growth can feel like weakness before it feels like strength. The old identity had practiced its role for years. The new self has only just begun. Buddhist practice encourages what is sometimes called a beginner's mind. This means meeting experience without pretending to know everything. It is a mind that remains open, curious, and willing to learn. A beginner's mind does not treat uncertainty as humiliation. It understands that not knowing is part of becoming. You do not need to perform confidence while entering a new life. You can move carefully. You can learn through experience. You can allow yourself to be new. The hidden grief may also arise from the end of hope. Some beginnings happen only after you finally accept that an old hope will not be fulfilled. You may begin rebuilding your life after realizing that someone will not return. You may start a different career after accepting that the first dream is no longer possible. You may create a new family structure after understanding that a relationship cannot be repaired. You may choose peace after admitting that an apology may never come. The new beginning becomes possible because you have stopped waiting. But giving up the waiting can feel like losing the last connection to what you wanted. Hope can keep pain alive, but it can also give pain purpose. It says, endure a little longer, perhaps things will change. When you release that hope, the mind may feel empty. This emptiness is not always hopelessness. Sometimes it is the space left when a false future is finally removed. For a while, you may not know what belongs there. Do not rush to fill it. Let the unreal future disappear fully. Let yourself grieve the conversation that will not happen, the life that will not be lived, the version of the person who never arrived, and the ending you did not receive. Closure is not always something another person gives you. Sometimes closure is the moment you stop waiting for them to become capable of giving it. This is painful because it ends the fantasy that the past can still be repaired, yet it also returns your energy to the present. As long as part of you is waiting, part of you cannot fully begin. The invisible grief inside a new beginning may show itself in unexpected ways. It may appear as tiredness, irritability, distraction, restlessness, or a desire to return to old habits. You may not feel obviously sad. You may simply feel emotionally unsettled. The mind often wants a clear reason for every feeling. When it cannot find one, it may decide that the new beginning itself is wrong. But emotion does not always speak directly. Grief can hide behind anger because anger feels more active. It can hide behind perfectionism because controlling every detail creates temporary certainty. It can hide behind procrastination because delaying the next step delays the finality of leaving the old life. A person may keep boxes unpacked after moving because fully arranging the new home makes the move feel real. Someone may avoid using a new title because it confirms the old role has ended. A person may keep checking the social media page of someone they left because complete silence feels too final. These actions are often not signs of stupidity. They are small ways the mind negotiates with change. It says, "Let me keep one thread connected to what was." There is no need to judge this impulse, but it should be seen clearly. A thread can become a rope that pulls you backward. Healthy grieving does not mean keeping every door half open. It means allowing the feelings connected to the ending while still respecting the decision to move forward. You can cry without making contact. You can remember without returning. You can feel uncertain without undoing your choice. You can miss the familiar without rebuilding the same prison. This is where discipline and compassion must work together. Compassion allows the heart to feel. Discipline prevents emotion from turning into self-betrayal. Without compassion, you become harsh with yourself. You say, "I should be over this. I wanted this change. Why am I still affected?" This creates shame on top of grief. Without discipline, every wave of emotion becomes a reason to abandon the new path. You confuse temporary discomfort with permanent truth. The middle path is to say, "This hurts, and I will still continue." Buddhist wisdom often returns to impermanence, the truth that all conditioned things change. People usually hear this teaching as a warning not to become attached, because everything will end. But impermanence also contains mercy. Because things change, grief changes too. The sadness you feel at the beginning will not remain exactly the same. The unfamiliar place may slowly become home. The new role may become natural. The silence that once felt empty may become peaceful. The person you were afraid to become may begin feeling more honest than the person you left behind. You do not have to force this process. Time alone does not heal everything, but awareness allows time to do its work. When grief is resisted, it often becomes stuck. The person keeps performing excitement, telling everyone how wonderful the new life is, and hiding every moment of sadness. The unspoken grief then appears in other forms. They may become emotionally numb. They may lose interest in the very opportunity they once wanted. They may become unusually critical of the new environment. They may romanticize the past and forget why they left. The mind does this because unacknowledged grief still needs expression. One gentle practice is to name what the beginning is asking you to leave. Do not speak only about what you are gaining. Ask, what is ending here? Perhaps your old daily routine is ending. Perhaps a certain relationship dynamic is ending. Perhaps the fantasy of who you thought you would become is ending. Perhaps your dependence on approval is ending. Perhaps your role as the person who saves everyone is ending. Perhaps your belief that you have unlimited time is ending. Naming the loss gives grief a shape. What has a shape can be understood. What remains unnamed often becomes a shadow over the future. You may also ask, what deserves to be remembered and what should not be carried forward? Not everything from the old life must be rejected. Some beginnings become painful because people believe they must erase the past to prove they have changed. But transformation does not require disrespecting everything that came before. You can carry lessons, memories, values, skills, and gratitude. You can keep what is alive without keeping what is harmful. A person leaving a difficult workplace may still value the friendships formed there. Someone ending a relationship may still honor the moments of genuine care. A person moving away may still carry the customs and memories of home. Someone changing beliefs may still respect the people who first taught them how to search for meaning. This is different from clinging. Clinging demands that the past continue. Remembrance allows the past to have a place without controlling the present. A photograph can be kept without becoming a doorway you walk through every night. A memory can be loved without becoming a demand that life return to what it was. Grief becomes lighter when the mind learns this distinction. The new beginning may also expose regret. Once the change happens, you may see how long you delayed it. You may think about years spent in fear, loyalty, confusion, or hesitation. You may ask, why did I not leave sooner? Why did I wait so long to begin? Why did I ignore what I already knew? This regret can poison the beginning if you use new awareness to attack your former self. The person you are now is judging someone who did not yet possess the same clarity. What seems obvious today may have been impossible to see from where you stood then. Perhaps you lacked support. Perhaps fear was stronger. Perhaps you were protecting others. Perhaps you still needed to learn something. Perhaps your identity was tied to staying. Perhaps the pain had not yet become clear enough. You do not need to pretend every delay was necessary. Some delays came from avoidance. Some choices caused real harm. But wisdom should lead to responsibility, not cruelty. You can admit, I stayed longer than I should have, without turning that truth into, I wasted my entire life. Nothing you learned must be wasted if it becomes awareness. Regret becomes useful when it changes your future behavior. It becomes destructive when it is used only to punish the past. The hidden grief of beginnings can be especially deep when change happens later than expected. A person may finally find love after years of loneliness, begin meaningful work after decades of confusion, or discover self-respect after a lifetime of pleasing others. The joy is real, but so is sorrow for the years that did not contain these things. They may grieve the younger self who needed what has only now arrived. They may think about all the choices that could have been different if this understanding had come earlier. This grief deserves tenderness. You cannot return to give your younger self a different life, but you can stop abandoning that person now. You can live in a way that honors what they needed. The new beginning may not repair every lost year, but it can prevent the loss from continuing. The past cannot receive your freedom, the present can. This is one of the deepest Buddhist lessons about time. The mind travels backward through memory and forward through fear, but life is only touched in the present. Grief often pulls you toward what has ended. Anxiety pulls you toward what has not yet happened. Awareness brings you back to the step directly beneath you. You may not be ready to love the entire new life. You may only be ready to meet today. Today, you can unpack one box. Today, you can make one honest decision. Today, you can allow one memory to pass without following it. Today, you can build one small routine in the new place. Today, you can speak to yourself without cruelty. Beginnings become less overwhelming when they are allowed to remain small. The mind often creates suffering by demanding immediate transformation. It says that because the chapter has changed, you should already know how to live inside it. It expects confidence, certainty, and peace at once. But a beginning is not a completed life. It is an opening. A seed does not fail because it has not yet become a tree. A sunrise is not incomplete because the whole sky is not bright at the first moment. You are allowed to arrive slowly. This patience does not mean becoming passive. It means respecting the natural pace of inner adjustment. External change can happen in one day. Internal change may take months or years. You may leave a house in an afternoon, but the body may still wake expecting the old room. You may end a relationship in one conversation, but the heart may continue reaching for the familiar person. You may receive a new opportunity, but confidence may take time to grow around it. The calendar can mark a beginning, but the soul does not always move according to the calendar. Buddhist practice teaches observation without immediate reaction. When grief rises, you do not have to solve it, explain it, or obey it. You can notice it as a changing state. You may feel pressure in the chest, heaviness in the body, or a sudden memory. You can breathe and say, grief is here, not I am broken, not this change was wrong, not I will always feel this way. Simply, grief is here. This language keeps the emotion from becoming a permanent identity. It allows the feeling to belong to the moment rather than defining the future. You may then ask what the grief needs. Sometimes it needs rest. Sometimes it needs expression. Sometimes it needs silence. Sometimes it needs a conversation with someone safe. Sometimes it needs a ritual that marks the ending. Human beings have always used rituals because the mind needs help recognizing transition. A farewell, a letter, a prayer, a final walk through a place, or a simple moment of gratitude can tell the heart, this mattered, and it is now changing. You do not need to send every letter you write. Some words are meant only to release what has been held inside. You might write, thank you for what this season gave me. I am sorry for what I could not understand then. I release the future I once expected. I will carry the lesson, but I will not carry the chain. The purpose is not to create a perfect ending. Many endings remain unfinished. The purpose is to make an inner gesture toward acceptance. Acceptance does not remove sadness. It stops arguing with reality. It says, this chapter has ended, although part of me still wishes it had ended differently. This sentence contains honesty without denial. Some people delay new beginnings because they believe grief must disappear first. They wait to feel completely ready, completely healed, and completely certain. But readiness often comes after movement, not before it. You may begin while still afraid. You may build while still grieving. You may laugh while still missing what was lost. You may create a beautiful life while carrying a tender place inside you. Healing is not the removal of every trace of pain. It is the ability to live fully without being ruled by that pain. A new beginning does not require emotional purity. It requires willingness. The grief may walk beside you for a while. Let it walk. Do not give it the map. There will come a moment when you notice that the new life no longer feels entirely new. The road that once required attention becomes familiar. The room begins to carry your presence. The silence becomes spacious rather than empty. You may feel guilty when this happens. Part of you may believe that feeling at home in the new life means you have forgotten the old one. But adapting is not betrayal. The heart can preserve meaning without remaining wounded forever. You do not honor the past by refusing every future. You honor it by allowing what you learned to make you more awake. The people, places, and versions of yourself that mattered do not become meaningless because you continue living. Their influence may appear in your patience, your boundaries, your courage, your tenderness, and the choices you now make. They move with you in a changed form. This is the quiet truth hidden inside grief. What ends does not always vanish. Sometimes it becomes wisdom. The home becomes a sense of what shelter means. The relationship becomes a clearer understanding of love. The failure becomes humility. The loneliness becomes compassion. The delay becomes urgency. The wound becomes discernment. The mind first experiences change as loss because it can no longer touch the old form. Awareness later discovers what remains. Every new beginning contains this double movement. Something leaves your hands and something enters your understanding. The hands feel empty before the understanding becomes clear. This is why you must not judge the beginning too quickly. What feels like emptiness may be space. What feels like uncertainty may be freedom from an old script. What feels like loneliness may be the quiet required to hear your own life again. Give the new chapter enough time to reveal itself. Do not compare its first page with the entire story that came before. The old life had years to gather meaning. The new one may still be learning your name. There will be difficult days when the past looks warmer than it truly was. Memory often softens old pain and highlights what was comforting. This can create the illusion that returning would restore something whole. But memory is selective. It may show you the laughter and hide the exhaustion. It may show the familiar room and hide the feeling of being trapped. It may show moments of connection and hide the repeated harm. When longing appears, remember the complete truth. Do not use the worst moment to condemn the whole past, but do not use the best moment to deny why it ended. Balanced remembrance protects you from both bitterness and illusion. You can say, there was beauty there, and it was still time to leave. You can say, I loved them, and the relationship was still hurting me. You can say, that place shaped me, and I no longer belong there. You can say, that dream mattered, and another path is now asking for my attention. These statements hold complexity without confusion. The mind becomes more peaceful when it no longer needs the past to be completely bad in order to justify moving forward. Something can be meaningful and complete. Someone can be loved and released. A season can be valuable and finished. Completion is not failure. A song is not ruined because it ends. Its ending gives the music its shape. In the same way, the ending of a chapter can reveal what the chapter meant. You may only understand its lesson after you are no longer living inside it. The grief hidden within the new beginning is therefore not an enemy. It is evidence that you are crossing a real boundary. It shows that the past had weight, that the choice matters, and that life is changing at a level deeper than appearance. But grief should be listened to, not worshipped. It can tell you what mattered. It cannot always tell you where to go next. The direction must come from awareness, values, and the truth of the present. Ask yourself, does this new path make me more honest? Does it allow me to live with greater compassion? Does it bring my actions closer to what I deeply value? Am I leaving because of wisdom or only running from discomfort? When the answer comes from clarity, temporary grief does not need to reverse the decision. You can bow to what is ending and still walk toward what is beginning. This bow is important in Buddhist thought. Bowing does not mean defeat, it means recognition. You recognize that life gave you something. You recognize that it cannot remain. You recognize that clinging will not stop change. Then you rise. You do not need to rise without tears. You only need to rise without demanding that the past rise with you. The invisible grief may remain for some time, but each step teaches the mind that an ending is not the end of your capacity to love, belong, create, or begin again. The person you are becoming will not erase the person you were. They will carry that history differently. One day, you may look back and understand that the sadness was not telling you to stop. It was simply saying goodbye. And once you learn to recognize grief as part of beginning, you become less likely to mistake discomfort for danger. Yet the mind still has another habit. Even after seeing that change can open a new life, it may choose the suffering it knows over the freedom it cannot predict. Familiar pain can still feel safer than an unknown future, and this is where the mind reaches one of its most confusing choices. It has already seen that every beginning carries grief, yet it still stands at the doorway and hesitates. Behind it is a life that hurts but feels familiar. Ahead is a freedom it has never experienced. The old suffering is painful, but it is known. The new life may be better, but it offers no guarantees. So the mind begins to whisper, perhaps staying here is safer. There are moments when a person knows clearly that something must change. The relationship has become empty. The work has taken away their peace. The habit is harming their body. The environment no longer allows them to grow. They can see the truth, feel it, and sometimes even speak it aloud. Yet they remain exactly where they are. From the outside, this may look like weakness or lack of courage, but beneath the hesitation is often a deeper fear. The person is not only afraid of leaving suffering, they are afraid of entering a life where the old suffering can no longer tell them what to expect. Familiar suffering creates a strange kind of safety. It has rules, it follows patterns. It may be painful, but the person understands how to survive it. They know how. The argument will begin. They know what words will be said. They know how long the silence will last. They know when disappointment will arrive and how they will respond. They know how to hide their feelings, how to lower their expectations, and how to continue after another difficult day. The suffering becomes a routine. Freedom has no such routine. Freedom asks questions the old life never required you to answer. What do you truly want? What will you do with your time? Whom will you become close to? How will you make decisions when fear is no longer making them for you? How will you live when you no longer have the same person, place, or problem to blame? These questions may sound hopeful, but they can also feel frightening. A life of choice carries responsibility. In a familiar prison, the walls decide where you can go. Outside the prison, you must choose your own direction. This is why some people stand beside an open door and do not leave. Buddhist wisdom teaches that the mind clings not only to pleasure, but also to whatever gives it a stable sense of reality. It attaches itself to patterns because patterns make life feel understandable. The mind often prefers certainty over happiness. If it can predict the pain, it feels prepared. If it cannot predict freedom, it feels exposed. This does not mean suffering is truly safe. It means the mind has learned how to function inside it. There is a difference between being safe and being skilled at surviving danger. A person who has lived with criticism for many years may become skilled at avoiding conflict. They study the moods of others, choose their words carefully, and silence their needs before anyone can reject them. These skills may help them move through a harsh environment. When they finally enter a kind environment, the old skills do not disappear immediately. They may still watch every face, prepare for anger, and apologize for things that require no apology. Kindness can feel suspicious because it does not match the world their mind has learned to expect. The person may even create tension where none existed. They may test someone's patience, hide information, or withdraw without explanation. Part of them is trying to discover whether the kindness is real. Another part is trying to return life to a pattern it understands. When conflict finally appears, the mind says, "There it is. I knew peace could not be trusted." The mind feels safer because uncertainty has ended, even though suffering has returned. This is one of the hidden reasons people repeat painful situations. They are not always searching for pain itself. They are searching for emotional conditions they know how to navigate. A calm life can feel more threatening than a difficult one when the nervous system has been trained by chaos. In chaos, the body remains alert. It watches, prepares, and reacts. This constant readiness becomes normal. When calm arrives, the body may not experience it as relief. It may experience it as the silence before something bad happens. The person waits. They search for signs. They wonder what they are missing. They may create unnecessary problems because the absence of tension feels unnatural. Once tension returns, the body enters the state it knows. It may not feel good, but it feels familiar. This is why unknown freedom cannot be entered through thought alone. You may understand that you deserve peace, yet your body may still interpret peace as danger. Freedom must be learned through repeated experience. The body must discover that a quiet room can remain quiet. A kind person can remain kind. A peaceful day does not always hide disaster. Rest does not need to be followed by punishment. Happiness does not automatically invite loss. These lessons take time because the body trusts experience more than promises. You cannot simply tell yourself, "I am free now," and expect every old response to disappear. Freedom becomes believable through small moments in which you act differently and survive the discomfort. You say no and discover that the world does not end. You ask for what you need and discover that someone listens. You rest and discover that you are still worthy. You leave a conversation and discover that protecting your peace does not make you cruel. You spend time alone and discover that solitude is not the same as abandonment. Each experience teaches the mind that a different life is possible. Still, the old suffering may continue calling you back because it offers something freedom does not offer immediately: identity. A person may know themselves as the one who endures, rescues, sacrifices, struggles, or survives. The suffering gives them a role. It tells them what they are supposed to do each day. If the struggle ends, the role becomes unnecessary. This can create emptiness. The person may ask, "Who am I when no one needs me to fix everything? What is my value when I am not carrying someone else's burden? What do I do when there is no crisis to solve?" They may say they want a peaceful life, but peace threatens the identity that made them feel important. A rescuer may repeatedly become close to people who need saving. At first, the relationship gives them purpose. They feel useful, needed, and morally strong. Over time, they become exhausted and resentful. They may complain that everyone depends on them, yet they feel uncomfortable around people who do not need constant help. An equal relationship can make them feel unnecessary. The familiar suffering of being overburdened feels safer than the unknown freedom of being loved without having to earn love through sacrifice. The same pattern can appear in people who build their identity around being mistreated. This does not mean they caused the harm they experienced. Responsibility always belongs to the person who chose harmful behavior. But after repeated mistreatment, the mind may form a fixed position. It learns to expect disrespect, prepare for betrayal, and interpret relationships through the question, "When will this person hurt me?" Even when a healthier choice becomes available, the person may hesitate. A respectful relationship asks them to speak, choose, and be seen. It gives them power they may not yet know how to use. Familiar suffering allowed them to remain emotionally hidden. Unknown freedom asks them to appear fully. Being seen can feel dangerous after years of being ignored, mocked, or punished for honesty. The person may confuse invisibility with safety. They keep their thoughts private, accept decisions they dislike, and remain in the background. They tell themselves that avoiding attention prevents conflict. But a life lived without expression creates a slow form of pain. The person remains physically present while their inner life is never allowed to enter the room. Freedom would require them to speak. It would require them to risk disagreement. It would require them to allow others to know what they like, dislike, fear, hope for, and believe. There is no guarantee that everyone will respond well. This is what makes freedom uncertain. It does not promise complete protection from rejection. It gives you the ability to remain connected to yourself, even when rejection occurs. The familiar mind seeks a life where no one can hurt it. The awakened mind seeks the strength not to abandon itself when hurt arrives. This is a different kind of safety. True safety is not the absence of every difficult experience. Such a life does not exist. True safety is the growing trust that you can respond with wisdom, ask for help, set boundaries, recover, and choose again. When this trust is absent, the mind looks for external certainty. It stays in a painful place because at least the pain has already revealed itself. It rejects new opportunities because they may fail. It avoids new people because they may disappoint. It remains silent because honesty may change relationships. The person tries to remove uncertainty from life, but uncertainty cannot be removed. It can only be exchanged. Staying has uncertainty. Leaving has uncertainty. Speaking has uncertainty. Silence also has uncertainty. Trying may lead to failure. Refusing to try may lead to regret. Trusting may bring disappointment. Refusing to trust may bring loneliness. There is no path where every outcome can be controlled. The mind must eventually choose which uncertainty allows life to expand and which certainty slowly destroys it. Familiar suffering often hides behind the phrase, "At least I know what I have." This statement sounds practical. Sometimes it is. Not every difficult situation should be abandoned quickly. Responsibilities, consequences, safety, finances, health, and the needs of others may require careful planning. Buddhist wisdom does not encourage reckless escape. It encourages clear seeing. Clear seeing asks whether caution is protecting life or merely protecting fear. There is a difference between waiting for the right time and using time to avoid a necessary decision. There is a difference between patience and self-abandonment. There is a difference between accepting temporary difficulty and making permanent peace with what is destroying your spirit. The mind can use wise words to hide fear. It may call fear loyalty. It may call avoidance patience. It may call silence maturity. It may call numbness peace. It may call surrender compassion. It may call dependence love. Words must be tested against reality. Does this choice make your mind clearer or more confused? Does it allow honesty or require constant pretending? Does it deepen compassion or increase resentment? Does it preserve dignity or slowly remove it? Does it give difficulty a purpose or does it repeat pain without growth? These questions do not always create an immediate answer, but they help separate wisdom from habit. The mind often stays with familiar suffering because it remembers the cost of leaving more clearly than the cost of staying. Leaving creates visible pain. There may be difficult conversations, financial changes, loneliness, criticism, and uncertainty. These costs appear close and sharp. The cost of staying is often slow. It arrives as lost years, reduced confidence, abandoned dreams, emotional exhaustion, and a gradual loss of connection with yourself. Because it happens slowly, the mind becomes used to it. A drop of water falling once is easy to notice. A stone being worn down over many years is harder to see. The person says, "Nothing terrible happened today." Yet something small may have been lost. They swallowed another truth, delayed another decision, ignored another inner warning, accepted another moment that contradicted their values. One day, they look back and realize that the greatest loss was not one dramatic event. It was the quiet disappearance of the life they never permitted themselves to live. Unknown. Freedom feels frightening because it requires mourning this lost time without becoming trapped in regret. When you finally see what familiar suffering has cost, anger may rise. You may become angry with yourself for staying, with others for influencing you, or with life for not making the truth clearer. This anger contains energy, but it must be handled carefully. If it becomes hatred for your former self, it creates another prison. The version of you who stayed was responding to what they understood, what they feared, and what they believed was possible. Perhaps they lacked support. Perhaps they had responsibilities others never saw. Perhaps they were taught that leaving meant failure. Perhaps they believed love required endless endurance. Compassion does not erase responsibility. It allows responsibility to become useful. You can say, "I see why I remained, and I also see that I cannot continue." This sentence contains both kindness and courage. Without kindness, you may rush into freedom as an act of punishment. You may make choices only to prove that you are no longer afraid. You may reject every form of commitment because commitment reminds you of captivity. But freedom is not the opposite of commitment. Freedom is the ability to choose commitment consciously. A person escaping control may begin rejecting every request, responsibility, or compromise. They may believe that saying no to everything proves independence. Yet, if every decision is still controlled by the fear of being controlled, the old suffering remains in charge. True freedom allows you to say yes without losing yourself and no without hatred. It allows you to remain when remaining is honest and leave when leaving is necessary. It is not rebellion against every limit. It is awareness of which limits protect what matters and which limits protect only habit. Some boundaries create freedom. A daily discipline may limit your choices for a few hours, but strengthen your future. Honoring a promise may restrict immediate comfort, but deepen trust. Caring for someone may require sacrifice, but still align with love. Not every difficulty is captivity. The question is whether the difficulty is freely chosen, meaningful and connected to your values, or whether it is maintained by fear, guilt, and the belief that you have no right to change. This distinction prevents the mind from confusing freedom with the absence of responsibility. Unknown freedom is not a life where you do whatever you want without consequences. It is a life where your actions arise from awareness rather than compulsion. You are free when anger can be present without forcing you to harm. You are free when fear can speak without making every decision. You are free when desire can arise without becoming your master. You are free when guilt can be examined instead of automatically obeyed. You are free when another person's disappointment does not immediately become proof that you are wrong. This inner freedom may begin long before external circumstances change. A person may not yet be able to leave a difficult situation, but they can begin seeing it clearly. They can stop calling harm normal. They can seek support, make plans, protect small areas of their life, and refuse to let another person define their worth. External freedom may require time. Inner honesty can begin now. This is important because people sometimes become discouraged when change cannot happen immediately. They believe that because the door cannot yet be opened fully, no movement is possible. But freedom often grows through preparation. A person learns a skill, They save money, they gather information, they rebuild relationships with trustworthy people, they practice making small decisions, they strengthen their body and mind, they begin noticing where their energy goes. These steps may not look dramatic, but they reduce dependence on familiar suffering. Each step tells the mind, I am becoming capable of another life. Capability changes fear. The unknown remains unknown, but you no longer meet it empty-handed. Buddhist practice strengthens this capability by teaching you to remain with discomfort without reacting immediately. The mind often returns to familiar suffering because the discomfort of freedom feels unbearable in the moment. You set a boundary and guilt appears. You stop contacting someone and loneliness appears. You leave a role and uncertainty appears. You refuse an old habit and restlessness appears. The mind says, go back. This feeling means the new path is wrong. But a difficult feeling is not always a warning. Sometimes it is a withdrawal from an old pattern. Guilt may appear because you were trained to believe that protecting yourself is selfish. Loneliness may appear because you ended a bond before new connections formed. Uncertainty may appear because the old role gave you clear instructions. Restlessness may appear because the habit once distracted you from emotions. These feelings are real, but they should not be interpreted too quickly. The practice is to remain still enough to ask, is this pain coming from harm, or is it coming from growth? Pain from harm usually makes you smaller, more confused, more isolated, and less connected to your values. Pain from growth may feel uncomfortable, but beneath it there is often a quiet sense of honesty. You may be afraid, yet you can breathe more deeply. You may be lonely, yet you no longer feel trapped. You may be uncertain, yet you feel less divided inside. You may grieve, yet you know you are no longer betraying yourself. This quiet honesty is easy to miss because it does not shout. Familiar suffering shouts through fear, memory, and habit. Freedom often speaks softly. It says, keep going. You do not recognize this life yet, but something here is true. The mind may demand proof before taking the next step. It wants to know that the future will be better, that no one will leave, that the new work will succeed, that the new relationship will remain healthy, and that the decision will never be regretted. Life cannot provide these guarantees. The demand for complete certainty becomes a way of choosing the familiar without admitting it. Courage does not mean believing everything will work exactly as planned. Courage means deciding that even if the path becomes difficult, you will meet it with awareness rather than return automatically to what has already harmed you. This confidence is not confidence in the future. It is confidence in your capacity to respond. You may make a mistake. Freedom includes the possibility of making new mistakes. But a mistake made while learning to live consciously is different from endless suffering accepted because fear refused every choice. You can correct direction. You can ask for help. You can change your mind. You can begin again. The unknown is not one final decision that traps you forever. It is a field of continuing choices. The mind often sees only two possibilities: remain in familiar suffering or leap into a perfect new life. Because perfection is impossible, it remains where it is. But freedom can begin with a single honest action. You do not have to solve your entire future tonight. You may need to admit one truth, end one false promise, ask one person for support, spend 1 hour doing something that belongs to you. Stop explaining one boundary, research one possibility, remove one small source of unnecessary suffering. These actions create evidence that movement is possible. A river does not cross the whole landscape at once. It continues through the space available to it. The unknown becomes less frightening when you meet it in small parts. This does not mean you should move so slowly that fear remains in control forever. Small steps must still be real steps. Planning must eventually become action. Understanding must eventually become choice. The mind can turn preparation into another hiding place. It can spend years gathering information, waiting for the perfect moment, and improving plans that are never used. At some point, the next lesson cannot be learned through thought. It must be learned through movement. A bird can study the sky from the branch, but it cannot learn flight without leaving the branch. The branch is familiar. It has held the bird before. The air offers no visible support, yet the wings cannot reveal their purpose while remaining folded. Human freedom often feels like this. The old life is solid because you can see and touch it. The future feels empty because its support has not yet appeared. You may not realize that some forms of support emerge only after movement begins. New friendships form after you enter new spaces. Confidence grows after you make decisions. Skills develop after you begin. Clarity increases after you stop feeding what confused you. The mind wants the bridge to appear before it takes a step. Life sometimes reveals the bridge one section at a time. This requires trust, but not blind trust. Blind trust ignores reality. Wise trust looks carefully, prepares what it can, accepts what it cannot know, and moves according to values. You may still feel fear. Fear does not have to disappear before freedom begins. Many people wait to become fearless. They believe courage is a feeling of complete calm. But courage often appears as a trembling action taken while the mind still wants to turn back. You speak while your voice is unsteady. You leave while part of you still misses what was familiar. You begin while doubts remain. You choose peace while chaos still feels more natural. This is not weakness. This is the nervous system learning that fear can be present without becoming the leader. Over time, the unknown starts becoming known. The new routine forms. The new boundary becomes easier. The new life develops its own shape. Then you may discover something surprising. What once felt like freedom may eventually become another form of familiarity. This is not bad. Familiarity itself is not the enemy. The problem begins when familiarity becomes more important than truth. A peaceful home can become familiar. Honest communication can become familiar. Rest can become familiar. Self-respect can become familiar. Wise choices can become familiar. The mind can learn safety in healthier places. The goal is not to live forever in uncertainty. It is to stop using certainty as a reason to remain in unnecessary suffering. Healthy familiarity remains flexible. It does not demand that life stay unchanged. It provides a stable ground from which change can be met. This is the difference between a home and a prison. Both have walls, but a home has a door you are allowed to open. The mind begins to heal when it realizes that freedom does not mean losing all structure. It means participating in the creation of structure. You can build routines that support your health instead of habits that numb your pain. You can create relationships based on respect instead of fear. You can accept responsibilities that have meaning instead of carrying burdens only because guilt demanded it. Freedom is not emptiness. It is room for conscious choice. This room may feel strange at first. After years of being told what to do, you may not know what you want. After years of meeting everyone else's needs, your own desires may feel distant. After years of reacting to crisis, a peaceful day may feel directionless. Do not panic when freedom first feels empty. The emptiness is not proof that the old suffering gave life more meaning. It may simply mean that your own voice has not been used in a long time. Sit with simple questions. What makes your mind feel clear? What kind of person do you respect? Which activities leave you tired but fulfilled? Which relationships allow truth? What do you do only because you fear judgment? What would kindness toward yourself look like today? The answers may arrive slowly. Freedom is not always a loud discovery. Sometimes it begins as a faint preference you finally allow yourself to notice. You may want more quiet. You may want fewer explanations. You may want work that feels useful. You may want relationships without constant guessing. You may want to stop living as if rest must be earned through exhaustion. These desires do not have to become immediate demands. They can become directions. A direction is enough to begin. The mind will still remember familiar suffering. On difficult days, it may romanticize the old life. It may say, "At least you knew who you were then. At least you were not this uncertain. Perhaps it was not as bad as you remember." This is why clear memory matters. Do not turn the past into an enemy, but do not remove the truth from it. Remember why change became necessary. Remember the moments when your spirit felt small. Remember the promises you made to yourself. Longing can select one comforting memory and use it to erase years of pain. Awareness holds the whole picture. There may have been love and harm. There may have been comfort and control. There may have been good days and a pattern that still could not continue. Complexity does not require return. You are allowed to appreciate what was good without placing yourself again inside what was harmful. This is one of the deepest signs of maturity. The immature mind needs the past to be completely terrible before it permits departure. The wise mind understands that something can contain beauty and still be complete. A beautiful cage remains a cage if you are not free to leave. And sometimes the bars are not made by another person. They are made from beliefs you have repeated for years. I am too old. I have already wasted too much time. No one will understand. I cannot survive alone. People like me do not change. It is better not to expect much. These thoughts may sound like facts because they have been repeated so often. But repetition does not create truth. It creates familiarity. A belief should be examined by what it produces. Does it create wisdom or paralysis? Does it protect you from real danger or protect you from discovering your strength? Does it encourage thoughtful action or endless delay? Some beliefs once helped you accept what could not be changed. Now they may be preventing you from changing what can. Buddhist wisdom asks you to observe thoughts rather than worship them. A thought appears, remains for a time, and passes. You do not have to turn every thought into an order. When the mind says, "Stay because the unknown is dangerous," you can answer, "The unknown contains danger, but it also contains possibilities the familiar cannot offer." When it says, "You may fail," you can answer, "Failure can teach me more than remaining asleep." When it says, "You will be alone," you can answer, "Loneliness may visit, but I will not abandon myself to avoid it." This inner conversation should not become a battle. The fearful mind is not your enemy. It is a protector using old information. Speak to it with firmness and kindness. Say, "I know why you want to return. You recognize that place. You know how to survive there. But survival is no longer the only life available to us." This is how you guide the mind toward freedom. You do not drag it through the doorway with hatred. You show it, step by step, that the open space is not an empty threat. There will be moments when freedom disappoints you. The new life will still contain ordinary problems. People will misunderstand you. Plans will fail. You may miss what was familiar. Do not use these difficulties as proof that change was wrong. Freedom was never a promise that pain would disappear. It was the end of a life organized around avoiding growth. You will still encounter grief, conflict, uncertainty, and loss, but you will meet them with greater honesty. Your suffering will no longer be protected merely because it is known. You will begin choosing meaningful difficulty over empty endurance. Learning may be difficult, but it expands you. Setting boundaries may be difficult, but it protects dignity. Starting again may be difficult, but it restores possibility. Telling the truth may be difficult, but it ends inner division. Familiar suffering asks you to remain small in exchange for predictability. Unknown. Freedom asks you to grow without promising comfort. This is the real choice. Not pain or no pain. Not fear or no fear. The choice is between pain that repeats without awakening and difficulty that leads toward a more conscious life. Once this becomes clear, the unknown no longer looks like a dark emptiness. It becomes a space where life has not yet been decided. The mind may still tremble before it, but trembling does not close the door. You can carry fear and still step forward. You can carry grief and still refuse to return. You can appreciate what once protected you and still recognize that it now limits you. The suffering you know may continue calling your name because it remembers an older version of you, but you are no longer required to answer every call from the past. Stand quietly at the doorway. Feel the pull of what is familiar. Notice the stories that ask you to remain. Then ask one final question. Am I staying because this is truly right, or because I already know how to suffer here? The answer may change the direction of your life, because the moment familiar pain stops appearing safer than unknown freedom, the mind begins to loosen its grip. Yet even after you step forward, another struggle can remain. The old world may be behind you, but the mind may continue rebuilding it through memory, repetition, and longing, exhausting itself by trying to create yesterday inside a life that has already moved on. And this is where the mind becomes tired in a way sleep cannot fully repair. The body may rest, the room may be quiet, and the day may have ended, yet something inside continues working. It keeps rebuilding. Conversations, restoring lost moments, correcting old choices, and trying to return life to a shape that no longer exists. The past is gone, but the mind keeps spending today trying to bring it back. There is a deep exhaustion that comes from living in one time while thinking in another. Your feet stand in the present, but your attention remains behind you. Life continues to move, yet the mind keeps turning around, searching for what has already disappeared. It asks what would have happened if you had spoken differently. It replays the day someone left. It rebuilds the home that changed, the friendship that faded, the opportunity that passed, or the version of yourself that seemed more hopeful. It moves the same memories around, hoping that a different arrangement will produce a different ending. But memory cannot change reality. It can only repeat an image of reality. This repetition may feel useful because the mind is active. It appears to be solving something. It examines every word, every silence, every choice, and every sign that was missed. It believes that if it thinks long enough, it may discover the one detail that can unlock the past and make it understandable. Yet there are situations that do not become peaceful through more analysis. They become peaceful only when the mind stops demanding a different history. Buddhist wisdom teaches that suffering grows when the mind refuses to meet what is here. The present moment may be quiet, but the mind fills it with a world that no longer exists. It then reacts emotionally to that inner world as though it were still happening. A memory appears and the body tightens. A sentence from years ago returns and anger rises. A face enters the mind and the heart feels abandoned again. The event is not occurring now, but the nervous system does not always understand the difference. Each replay can renew the same emotional response. The mind believes it is remembering, but the body may feel as though it is reliving. This is one reason old pain can remain fresh for so long. The original experience happened once, but the inner reconstruction happens many times. A painful event may have lasted minutes, days, or months. The mind can extend it across years by returning to it every morning and carrying it into every night. This does not mean you should blame yourself for remembering. Memory is not a moral failure. Painful moments often return without invitation. The mind naturally tries to organize what disturbed it. But there is a difference between a memory visiting and building a home for it. A memory visits when it appears, is noticed, and passes. You build a home for it when you feed it with repeated questions, imagined conversations, and endless attempts to change what cannot be changed. The exhausting part is not always the memory itself. It is the struggle to complete an unfinished past. Perhaps there was no proper goodbye. Perhaps someone left without explaining. Perhaps you were denied the chance to speak. Perhaps you understood the truth only after the moment had passed. The mind hates unfinished things. It wants a clear conclusion. It wants a reason, an apology, a final answer, or a scene in which everything is finally said. When life does not provide this, the mind creates imagined endings. It pictures the conversation that should have happened. It gives the other person words they never spoke. It creates the apology they never offered. It imagines returning with greater strength, clearer language, or better timing. For a moment, the imagined scene may bring relief. You finally say what you wanted to say. You finally make them understand. You finally leave with dignity. Then the image fades and reality remains unchanged. The mind begins again. This cycle consumes energy because the brain keeps preparing for an event that will never occur in the same form. It rehearses a meeting with yesterday. There is nothing wrong with using reflection to understand an experience. Reflection can reveal lessons. It can show where boundaries were missing, where fear controlled you, or where you need to act differently in the future. But reflection has completed its work when the lesson becomes clear. After that, repetition no longer creates wisdom. It creates weariness. The mind may say, "I am still thinking because I have not found the answer." But sometimes the answer has already arrived, and the mind does not like it. The answer may be that the person did not care in the way you hoped. The answer may be that you made a mistake you cannot undo. The answer may be that timing changed everything. The answer may be that no one was fully wrong, yet the relationship still could not continue. The answer may be that life offered no fairness. These answers do not satisfy the mind because they do not restore control. They do not create a door back into the past. They ask you to live with reality as it is. This is where acceptance begins, and acceptance often feels painful before it feels peaceful. The mind may prefer endless confusion to a clear truth that requires release. As long as you are still analyzing, you can feel that something remains possible. Perhaps one more thought will change the meaning. Perhaps one more memory will reveal a hidden path. Perhaps one more conversation will reopen the door. But when you accept that the past is complete, possibility closes. This closure can feel like another loss. You are not only losing what happened, you are losing the belief that it might still be changed. The mind often rebuilds yesterday to delay this finality. It holds old situations in an unfinished state because unfinished things still feel alive. A completed loss belongs to the past. An unfinished loss continues asking for attention. You may keep checking whether someone has changed. You may revisit places connected to an old life. You may repeat the story to different people, hoping that a new listener will produce a new meaning. Each action keeps a small door open. The door may not lead anywhere, but closing it feels unbearable. Buddhist wisdom does not demand that you close it violently. Force can make the mind more attached. Instead, you begin by seeing what the open door is costing you. How much energy goes into waiting? How many present moments are interrupted by old conversations? How many new people are compared with someone who is gone? How many opportunities are ignored because they do not resemble the future you once expected? The cost may not appear dramatic. It may appear as constant tiredness, difficulty concentrating, emotional distance, or the feeling that life has become colorless. The present cannot compete with a perfected memory. Memory removes ordinary details. It selects what supports the emotion you are carrying. If you miss someone, it may highlight tenderness and hide conflict. If you regret leaving, it may show comfort and hide the reasons you went. If you miss an earlier version of yourself, it may show energy and possibility while hiding confusion and fear. The past begins to look complete because you are no longer living its difficult details. The mind rebuilds yesterday from selected pieces. It does not restore the full day. It restores a story. This is why nostalgia can be both sweet and dangerous. It can remind you of what mattered, but it can also make the present seem poor by comparison. A remembered summer contains sunlight, laughter, and freedom. It may not contain boredom, uncertainty, or the worries that existed at the same time. A remembered relationship contains the best conversation and the most meaningful touch. It may not contain the repeated disappointment, emotional distance, or fear that slowly weakened it. A remembered version of yourself may seem more alive. You may forget that the person you were then also wished for some of the understanding you have now. The past is easier to love because it can no longer interrupt the image you have created of it. The present is less polished. It contains unfinished tasks, changing moods, uncertainty, and ordinary discomfort. It is alive, so it cannot be completely controlled. This is why the mind sometimes chooses the beauty of memory over the difficulty of participation. It is easier to visit a perfect yesterday than to build an imperfect today. But no life can be lived in memory. Memory can offer meaning, but it cannot offer movement. It cannot introduce you to someone new, allow you to make a different decision, or give your hands something real to hold. The mind becomes exhausted because it keeps trying to receive life from a place where life is no longer happening. It is like returning to an empty well and lowering the bucket again and again. The movement continues, but nothing new comes up. The exhaustion can become especially strong when the mind rebuilds a former identity. You may remember who you were before disappointment, illness, loss, responsibility, or age changed you. You may think, "I want to be that person again." This desire is understandable. Perhaps the earlier version of you felt lighter, more confident, more hopeful, or more free. You may believe peace will return only if you can restore that former self. But you cannot return to being someone who had not yet lived through what you now know. You can recover qualities from the past, but you cannot erase the journey. You may become joyful again, but it will be a joy that knows sorrow. You may trust again, but it will be a trust shaped by discernment. You may feel strong again, but the strength may be quieter. You may begin again, but you will not be beginning from the same place. The mind suffers when it treats healing as restoration instead of transformation. Restoration says, "Make me exactly as I was." Transformation says, "Help me become whole with everything that has happened." The first demand may be impossible. The second remains available. A broken clay bowl cannot become untouched clay again, but it may be repaired in a way that reveals both its damage and its continued value. Human healing does not always remove every sign of what occurred. Sometimes it creates a deeper way of living around the scar. You are not required to return to innocence. You are invited to grow into wisdom. The wish to become who you were can also create cruelty toward who you are now. You compare your present energy, appearance, confidence, or ability with an earlier time. Every difference becomes evidence of decline. You look at an old picture and feel that something has been stolen. You remember how quickly you once moved, how easily you once trusted, or how many possibilities seemed open. This comparison can make today feel like a lesser version of life, but every season has qualities that another season cannot contain. Youth may carry energy, but age may carry patience. Earlier life may contain possibility, while later life may contain discernment. The past may have given you speed, while the present gives you depth. The mind sees only what was lost when it measures one season by the standards of another. A tree in winter is not a failed summer tree. It is living according to a different season. This does not mean you should deny real loss. The body changes. Opportunities close. Some abilities cannot be recovered. False positivity creates another form of resistance. Wisdom does not say, "Nothing has changed." It says, "Change has occurred, and life must now be met in a new form." The exhaustion comes from demanding summer behavior from a winter season. You may keep pushing the body to prove that time has not passed. You may chase old goals because admitting they no longer fit feels like defeat. You may remain loyal to routines that no longer serve your health. You spend energy defending an earlier image instead of discovering what the present is asking from you. This is not surrender, it is adaptation. A wise person does not insult the river because it changed direction. They study the new path of the water. The mind also rebuilds yesterday through repeated explanations. A person may tell the same story so often that it becomes the main doorway through which they understand themselves. Every new event is connected to the old event. Every conflict becomes another example of the same wound. Every disappointment is used to prove that nothing has changed. The story may be true, but truth can still become a prison when it is never allowed to develop. A story should not only explain where you came from, it should also leave room for where you are going. When the old event becomes the explanation for everything, the present loses its independence. A new person is not allowed to be new because they are judged through someone else's actions. A new opportunity is not allowed to be different because it is compared with an old failure. A new day is not allowed to begin because yesterday has already defined its meaning. The mind believes consistency makes the story true. But sometimes wisdom requires changing the story's role. Perhaps the old story once said, "This proves I am powerless." Later it may say, "This taught me where I gave away my power." Perhaps it once said, "This proves I cannot trust." Later it may say, "This taught me that trust should grow slowly." Perhaps it once said, "This ruined my life." Later it may say, "This changed my life and I am still deciding what that change will become." The facts may remain the same. The relationship with the facts can change. Buddhist awareness creates this space. It does not rewrite history. It releases history from having only one meaning. A painful experience may first mean loss. With time, it may also reveal truth, courage, boundaries, compassion, or a clearer direction. This does not justify harm. It does not turn suffering into something beautiful merely because a lesson was learned. It simply refuses to let one event control every future interpretation. The mind exhausts itself when it keeps demanding that the past provide something it cannot provide now. Perhaps you want an apology from someone who lacks the awareness to offer one. You may replay the harm, preparing the perfect explanation that would finally make them understand. But understanding cannot be forced into another person. You can speak clearly, you can set boundaries, you can describe the effect of their behavior, yet you cannot enter their mind and create remorse. Waiting for someone else's awakening can keep your life suspended. The person may continue living without thinking about what happened, while your mind spends years holding an inner trial. You gather evidence, you repeat the argument, you imagine the moment when justice will finally be recognized. This inner courtroom never closes because the person you want to judge may never appear in the way you need. There are times when external justice should be pursued. Harm may require consequences, protection, or legal action. Acceptance does not mean refusing practical steps, but inner peace cannot always wait for external recognition. You may need to say, "They may never understand what they did, but I understand what happened, and I will protect my life now." This statement ends the belief that your healing requires their agreement. The mind may resist because it wants fairness. This desire is deeply human. When something unjust occurs, letting go can feel like allowing injustice to win. But letting go does not declare the event fair. It declares that the event will not continue controlling your inner life. You can remember without rehearsing. You can seek accountability without giving hatred every hour. You can protect yourself without carrying the person into every new room. The past does not need to be forgotten. It needs to be placed where it can no longer command the present. This placement is not one dramatic act. It happens through many small decisions. You notice the memory and choose not to build a new argument around it. You feel the old anger and allow the body to settle before speaking. You catch yourself comparing the present with a polished image of the past. You bring attention back to what is actually in front of you. These choices may appear simple, but they return energy to life. Attention is one of your most limited resources. Wherever attention goes repeatedly, emotional life follows. When attention is constantly sent backward, the present becomes weak from neglect. Relationships need attention. The body needs attention. The work in front of you needs attention. Joy needs attention. Even peace needs attention, because a quiet moment can pass unnoticed while the mind is occupied with something that ended years ago. You may believe that memories take your attention. Sometimes they do, but with practice, you begin to notice the moment you start feeding them. A memory may arrive without permission. The second, third, and fourth inner conversation often involve a choice. You may not control the first image, but you can choose whether to build an entire evening around it. This is not emotional suppression. Suppression says, "I must not feel this." Awareness says, "This feeling is here, but I do not need to create 10 more thoughts to keep it alive." There is a difference between feeling grief and telling yourself the same painful story for hours. The feeling may be heavy, but simple. The story adds accusation, prediction, judgment, and imagined futures. The feeling says, "I miss them." The story says, "I will never feel this way again. I lost my only chance. Life was better then. Nothing ahead will matter." The first statement is grief. The rest is the mind rebuilding yesterday and using it to close tomorrow. This is where compassion must be joined with discipline. Compassion allows you to acknowledge the loss. Discipline prevents loss from becoming a prophecy. You can say, "I miss what was, and I do not know what is coming." This is more honest than saying, "Nothing good will come again." The future has not yet given its evidence. The mind often judges the future by the best parts of the past. This is an unfair comparison. The past has already had time to gather meaning. The future is still empty of experience. A new friendship cannot immediately contain the memories of a 10-year friendship. A new home cannot feel like a place where decades were lived. A new skill cannot carry the ease of something practiced for years. The mind sees this absence and calls the new life shallow. But depth is created through presence over time. You cannot demand that a beginning feel like a history. The exhaustion of rebuilding yesterday often appears in relationships through comparison. A person may compare every new partner with someone from the past. They compare voices, habits, humor, affection, and small gestures. The new person is forced to compete with a memory. This competition cannot be won because memory has been edited. It contains no current misunderstandings, changing moods, or ordinary flaws. It exists under the control of the remembering mind. A living person cannot compete with an image that never changes. The comparison prevents real contact. Instead of seeing who is present, the person sees how they differ from who is absent. Buddhist awareness asks you to meet each being as they are, not as a replacement for someone else. No one new can restore an old relationship. They can only create a different relationship. Different does not automatically mean less, but the mind must release the demand for repetition before it can recognize new forms of care. The same is true of opportunities. You may reject a new path because it does not look like the dream you lost. You keep waiting for the original plan to return, even as life presents other directions. Perhaps you wanted one profession, one kind of family, one place to live, or one clear future. When that image collapsed, every alternative felt like a poor copy. The mind says, "This is not what I planned." Life answers, "No, but it is what is here." This is not a promise that every unwanted change will become wonderful. Some alternatives remain difficult. Some losses are never replaced. But a life can still become meaningful without becoming the life you first designed. Meaning is not limited to one form. A person may fail to reach one dream and discover a quieter purpose. They may lose one relationship and deepen several others. They may leave one home and slowly create belonging elsewhere. The new life should not be asked to replace the old one exactly. It should be allowed to reveal its own value. Rebuilding yesterday prevents this revelation because every new thing is judged by how well it copies what disappeared. The mind then complains that nothing feels the same. Of course it does not feel the same. It is not the same. The question is not whether the present can become yesterday. The question is whether you are willing to meet what the present can become. This willingness requires humility. The mind likes to believe it already knows which form of life will bring happiness. It creates a detailed image and becomes attached to it. When reality changes the image, the mind feels personally betrayed. But life never promised to follow the private picture in your head. Plans are useful, but they are not contracts with the universe. Buddhist wisdom encourages intention without rigid attachment. You can move towards something with effort and sincerity while accepting that conditions may change. This is not carelessness. It is flexibility. Rigid hope says, "Only this result will make my life meaningful." Wise intention says, "I will give myself fully to this direction, but I will remain awake to what life reveals." When the first path closes, wise intention grieves and then looks again. Rigid hope remains before the closed door, rebuilding the room behind it. Years can pass there. The person continues speaking about what should have happened. They measure every current result against the lost plan. The past becomes not only a memory, but a judge. This judge is never satisfied because the present cannot meet a standard created by an unlived possibility. An unlived life has no ordinary disappointments. It remains perfect because it never became real. You may think the job you did not take would have made you fulfilled. You may believe the person you did not choose would have created a happier relationship. You may believe one different decision would have removed every difficulty. But you are comparing a real life with an imagined life. The real life contains mistakes, dull days, responsibility, conflict, and change. The imagined life contains only the qualities you assign to it. This comparison creates endless regret because imagination can always produce a better picture than reality. Buddhist clarity asks you to respect the unknown. You do not know exactly what the other path would have contained. It may have brought joy. It may have brought another form of suffering. It may have led to lessons you cannot see. You can acknowledge that a different choice might have changed your life without claiming that it would have perfected it. This releases the mind from worshipping what never happened. Regret can then become instruction rather than punishment. If you failed to speak, learn to speak now. If you delayed too long, practice acting with greater honesty now. If you ignored your values, return to them now. If fear controlled a choice, examine where fear is controlling you today. The past becomes useful when it changes your present behavior. It becomes exhausting when it is used only to condemn a person who can no longer return and choose differently. You cannot send wisdom backward. You can only embody it now. The mind may say, if I stop regretting, I will repeat the mistake. But constant regret does not guarantee wisdom. Sometimes it drains the very energy needed for change. A person spends so much time attacking themselves for the old choice that they become afraid to make any new choice. They believe self-punishment proves responsibility, but responsibility is not the same as endless suffering. Responsibility says, I understand the harm, I will repair what I can, and I will act differently. Self-punishment says, because I failed then, I do not deserve peace now. The first transforms the past. The second keeps rebuilding it. Where repair is possible, repair should be made. Apologize, return what belongs to someone, correct false information, change harmful behavior, accept fair consequences, but after sincere repair, continued self-hatred serves no one. It does not restore the old moment. It only creates another wounded moment in the present. Buddhist compassion includes the person you once were, not because every action was acceptable, but because hatred cannot guide anyone toward wisdom. You can hold yourself accountable without turning your entire identity into a punishment. Say, I did something I regret, rather than, I am only what I did. The first leaves room for transformation. The second makes yesterday permanent. The mind also rebuilds the past by searching for people who confirm the old version of you. You may feel strangely comfortable around those who remember your earlier role. They know you as the quiet one, the troubled one, the successful one, the dependent one, or the one who never says no. Around them, you may return to old behavior without noticing. The role is already prepared. You only need to step into it. This can make growth feel unreal. You may feel strong and clear alone, then become small again in a familiar environment. The mind is responding to old signals. A certain voice, room, expression, or family pattern can awaken a former way of being. Do not judge yourself too quickly when this happens. It shows where awareness is still needed. Growth is not only what you understand in private, it is what you can remember when old conditions return. You may need to pause before answering. You may need to speak more slowly. You may need to leave the room rather than continue a familiar argument. You may need to stop explaining your growth to people committed to remembering your past. Not everyone will update their picture of you. Some people prefer the version they understood. Your change may disturb the balance of the relationship. You cannot control whether they see you clearly. You can control whether you keep performing an outdated identity to make their memory comfortable. The past also survives through objects and places. A song, photograph, scent, road, or piece of clothing can suddenly bring an old world into the present. These reminders are not enemies. They reveal how deeply experience is connected to the senses. You do not need to remove every reminder, but you should notice whether certain objects support remembrance or prevent movement. There are things you may keep with gratitude. There are things you may need to release because each encounter reopens a cycle you are trying to complete. The decision is personal. Keeping something does not always mean clinging. Throwing something away does not automatically create freedom. The true question is what relationship you have with it. Can you see the photograph and allow warmth and sadness to pass? Or do you use it to enter hours of imagined return? Can you visit the place and recognize that life changed? Or do you leave feeling that the present is meaningless? Awareness, not appearance, reveals whether remembrance has become captivity. Sometimes a simple act of release helps the mind understand what thought alone cannot. You may place old letters away, change a room, return an object, or stop visiting a digital page. These actions tell the body, we are no longer waiting here. They do not erase love. They create a boundary around memory. The mind may protest. It may say that letting go of the object means letting go of the person or the meaning. But meaning does not live only in objects. What mattered may remain in how you speak, love, choose, and understand life. You can release the physical doorway while keeping the wisdom. This is how remembrance becomes light enough to carry. The exhaustion of rebuilding yesterday decreases when you begin investing attention in what can still respond to you. The past cannot respond. The present can. The body can respond to care. A friendship can respond to honesty. A skill can respond to practice. A room can respond to your presence. A day can respond to how you enter it. The present may not offer the answer you wanted from the past, but it offers something the past never can: participation. You can still influence what happens here. This is why returning to the senses is so important in Buddhist practice. The senses bring the mind out of the reconstructed world and back into direct experience. Feel the breath entering. Notice the weight of the body. Listen to the nearest sound. See the light in the room. Touch the object in your hand. These simple acts are not an escape from deep emotion. They remind the mind which moment is alive. The memory may still be present, but it is no longer the whole world. There is a chair beneath you, air around you, and a life still occurring. The mind needs this reminder, because thought can make the absent feel closer than the present. A person who has been gone for years may feel emotionally near, while the person sitting beside you is barely noticed. A missed opportunity may occupy more attention than the opportunity in front of you. The past becomes large because attention is feeding it. The present becomes small because attention is absent. Mindfulness restores proportion. It does not declare the past unimportant. It simply stops allowing what is absent to consume what is here. You may need to practice this many times. The mind may return after a few seconds. That is not failure. Each return to the present is the practice. You are not trying to erase memory. You are strengthening the ability to choose where you live inwardly. Over time, yesterday begins to lose its demand. It becomes one part of your life rather than the place from which every day is controlled. You may still remember. Some memories may always bring tenderness. Certain dates, songs, or places may always awaken something. Peace does not require emotional emptiness. It requires that memory no longer orders you to stop living. One day, you may think of what happened and notice that the body does not tighten in the same way. You may remember the person without needing to continue the conversation. You may see the old dream without feeling that every other life is a failure. Nothing dramatic may announce this change. You simply realize that the past has become quiet. It has not disappeared. It has taken its proper place. This quiet is not forgetting. It is integration. The experience has entered your understanding. You no longer need to rebuild it because you have received what it can give. The lesson remains. The repeated suffering becomes unnecessary. This is the point where yesterday stops being a house you live in and becomes a road you have traveled. You can look back and see its shape. You can understand how it brought you here, but you no longer need to walk backward to prove that it mattered. The mind becomes less tired when it stops carrying unfinished versions of every former life. It releases the conversation that never happened. It releases the perfect response that came too late. It releases the person it might have been. It releases the future that belonged to an old plan. In that release, energy returns. Attention becomes available. The present begins to have texture again. You notice small things that constant remembering had hidden. A kind voice, a new interest, a peaceful hour, a choice that still belongs to you. Life does not suddenly become easy, but it becomes reachable. This is the gift of no longer rebuilding yesterday. You stop demanding that the present provide the same form of life, and you begin receiving the form that is actually here. The past may have been beautiful. It may have been painful. It may have been both. But it cannot be lived again. The more gently you accept this, the less energy you waste trying to make memory behave like reality. You can thank yesterday without reconstructing it. You can grieve it without following it. You can learn from it without kneeling before it. You can carry its wisdom without carrying its weight. And when the mind finally stops rebuilding what life has already taken apart, it begins to see another truth. Change itself was never the punishment. The deeper pain came from the resistance that turned every natural ending, every shifting season, and every necessary movement into a personal battle. And this is where the mind begins to understand why it has been so tired. Change itself was not always the heaviest burden. The greater weight came from fighting what had already changed. Life moved forward, but the mind remained behind, pulling against reality as if enough struggle could force the world to return. What began as a natural ending slowly became a private punishment. A season changes without asking permission. A child grows older. A body loses some of its strength. A relationship changes form. A place that once felt permanent becomes part of memory. These movements belong to life. They are not personal attacks, yet the resisting mind receives them as if life has chosen to take something away from it alone. It asks, why is this happening to me? The question makes the change feel personal. Instead of seeing an experience that many human beings must face, the mind begins to see unfair treatment. It feels singled out by life. This does not mean every event is small or easy. Some changes bring deep loss. Some arrive suddenly and leave the heart struggling to understand what happened. Buddhist wisdom does not ask you to pretend that pain is harmless. It asks you to see the difference between the pain of what happened and the suffering created by the demand that it should not have happened. The first pain belongs to the event. The second pain is produced by resistance. A person loses something important. Grief rises naturally, but the mind adds another layer when it says, "This should not be true. Life must give it back. I cannot continue unless the past returns." The grief is already heavy. The argument with reality makes it heavier. This is how a natural human experience becomes personal punishment. The mind takes an event that has already caused pain and continues striking itself with thoughts about how the event should have been different. It remembers what was lost, then blames itself for losing it. It notices change, then becomes angry for not preventing it. It feels sadness, then feels ashamed for being sad. One experience becomes several forms of suffering. Buddhist teachings sometimes describe this through the image of being struck by two arrows. The first arrow is the unavoidable pain of life. The second arrow is the suffering added by fear, blame, resistance, and endless mental struggle. You may not be able to stop every first arrow. Life contains illness, separation, aging, disappointment, uncertainty, and death. But awareness can prevent the mind from firing the second arrow again and again. The second arrow often appears as the word should. This should not have ended. They should have understood me. My body should still work as it once did. I should have known what would happen. Life should be easier by now. I should not feel this way. The word may seem harmless, but it creates a battle between reality and expectation. Reality stands as it is. Expectation insists that reality must take another form. Because reality does not obey, the mind becomes frustrated. It then turns the frustration inward. Perhaps I failed. Perhaps I was not good enough. Perhaps I am being punished. Perhaps everyone else knows how to live except me. The mind creates a personal meaning around an impersonal movement. A storm does not arrive because it hates one tree. Winter does not come because the garden has failed. A river does not change direction to insult the land. In the same way, many changes are not judgments about your worth. They are conditions moving according to causes that are larger than one person's wishes. People grow in different directions. Bodies age. Opportunities open and close. Feelings rise and pass. Circumstances change because countless conditions are always interacting. Yet the mind often places itself at the center of everything. When something pleasant arrives, it says, "This proves I am doing well." When something painful arrives, it says, "This proves something is wrong with me." This self-centered interpretation does not always come from pride. Sometimes it comes from the desire for control. If every event is about you, then perhaps you can find a way to prevent every painful event. The mind would rather blame itself than accept that some parts of life cannot be controlled. Self-blame creates suffering, but it also creates the illusion of power. It says, "If this was entirely my fault, then perhaps I can make sure it never happens again." Sometimes responsibility is real. Your choices may have contributed to an outcome. Wisdom requires honest examination. But responsibility is different from believing you controlled every condition. You may have made mistakes, but another person also had choices. You may have prepared carefully, but circumstances still changed. You may have offered love, but love could not force another heart to remain. You may have cared for your health, but the body was never promised permanent strength. Clear responsibility says, "This part belonged to me." Resistance says, "Everything should have obeyed my effort." The second belief punishes you for not being powerful enough to control life itself. Buddhist wisdom asks you to see causes and conditions more clearly. Nothing arises from one cause alone. A relationship, decision, success, failure, or loss is shaped by many forces. Your actions matter, but they are not the only actions. Your intentions matter, but intentions do not guarantee results. Your effort matters, but effort exists inside a changing world. When you understand this, you can learn without carrying false guilt. You can say, "I wish I had acted differently and I will grow from this," without saying, "I destroyed everything and deserve to suffer forever." You can acknowledge your part without turning pain into a sentence against yourself. Resistance also creates punishment by demanding that emotions move faster than they naturally can. Something changes, and the mind immediately asks when you will be over it. It wants grief to disappear, fear to become confidence, and confusion to become clarity. It treats healing like a task that should be completed quickly. When emotions remain, the person feels defective. They think, "Why am I still affected? Why can everyone else move forward? Why can I not let go?" Now they are not only grieving the change, they are also judging the pace of their grief. The judgment tightens the emotion. Sadness becomes shame. Fear becomes weakness. Uncertainty becomes failure. The mind begins fighting its own natural response, but emotions are also part of change. They rise because the inner world is adjusting to what has happened. Grief helps the heart recognize loss. Fear warns that the future is unfamiliar. Confusion appears when old understanding no longer fits. These feelings do not always need immediate removal. Sometimes they need room. A wound heals according to conditions, not according to impatience. Constantly touching it to see whether it has healed can slow the process. The same is true of emotional pain. Repeatedly asking why it is still present keeps attention fixed on it. The person begins measuring every day against an expected state of complete peace. Any sadness becomes proof that healing has failed, but healing rarely moves in a straight line. A peaceful week may be followed by a difficult morning. A memory may return after months of silence. An old fear may appear when a new situation resembles the past. This does not mean you have returned to the beginning. A wave returning to the shore is not the entire ocean moving backward. The feeling may return, but you are meeting it with different awareness. You may understand it sooner, react less strongly, or recover more gently. Progress is not the total absence of pain. It is the changing relationship you have with pain. Resistance overlooks this. It demands that change leave no trace. It wants the event to be over, the emotion to be gone, and the person to return to normal. But perhaps the old normal no longer exists. Some experiences do not allow you to return unchanged. They ask you to build a new way of being. The demand to return to normal can become another form of punishment. You compare yourself with the person you were before the loss, before the illness, before the disappointment, or before life changed direction. Every difference feels like evidence that you are still broken. But the goal may not be to become who you were. The goal may be to become someone who can carry the truth without being crushed by it. This person may have different limits, needs, and priorities. They may move more carefully. They may value things they once ignored. They may no longer tolerate what they once accepted. Resistance calls this loss. Wisdom may recognize it as transformation. There is also punishment in resisting the ordinary changes of the body. The body is never still. It grows, strengthens, weakens, heals, tires, and ages. The mind, however, often holds an old image and demands that the body continue matching it. A person notices slower movement, changing appearance, or reduced energy. Instead of responding with care, they respond with insult. They say, "I hate what I have become." But the body has not betrayed them. It is following the nature of all living things. This does not mean health should be neglected. Caring for the body is an act of wisdom. Movement, rest, food, treatment, and attention matter. Yet care and hatred are not the same. Care asks, "What does this body need now?" Hatred asks, "Why can this body not remain as it was?" The first responds to reality. The second punishes reality for changing. A body treated with hatred becomes another place of conflict. Every mirror becomes a judge. Every limitation becomes humiliation. Every sign of age becomes an enemy. The person may miss the life still available because they are mourning a form that could never remain forever. Buddhist wisdom invites gratitude for the body without pretending it is permanent. This body has carried you through every season. It has allowed you to see, touch, move, work, embrace, rest, and experience the world. Its changing nature does not remove its value. A flower is not worthless because it does not remain in bloom. Resistance also turns other people's growth into personal punishment. Someone close to you changes, and the mind decides their change is a rejection of you. A child becomes independent, and a parent feels abandoned. A friend develops new interests, and the mind feels replaced. A partner needs more space, and the mind hears, "You are no longer enough." Sometimes these fears point to real problems that need honest conversation, but sometimes another person's change is simply part of their own path. Their need to grow does not always mean your love failed. Their new boundary is not always an attack. Their changing opinion is not always betrayal. The resisting mind takes movement personally because it wants relationships to remain in familiar forms. It may prefer an unhappy closeness to a changing bond. It holds tightly, questions every difference, and demands reassurance. The pressure then creates the distance it feared. This is one of the painful ways resistance produces its own evidence. The mind fears change in the relationship, so it tries to control the other person. The other person feels confined and withdraws. The mind then says, "I knew they were leaving." What began as fear became behavior, and behavior helped create the result. Love without acceptance becomes possession. It says, "You must remain the person who makes me feel safe." But no human being can promise to remain unchanged. Healthy love does not mean feeling no fear when someone grows. It means allowing the relationship to respond honestly to that growth. Perhaps the bond will deepen. Perhaps it will become more distant. Perhaps it will end. Acceptance does not guarantee the outcome you prefer. It prevents you from destroying the present by trying to force the future. Resistance can also make change feel like punishment when your plans fail. You work toward a particular result, invest time, and expect life to unfold in a certain way. Then conditions shift. The opportunity disappears. Someone changes their decision. Your own desires become different. The path closes. The mind may say, "All that effort was wasted." This thought turns disappointment into personal punishment. It suggests that anything not producing the planned result had no value, but effort can shape you even when it does not create the expected outcome. You may have learned discipline, patience, skill, humility, or courage. You may have discovered what you truly value. You may have met people or understood yourself more deeply. This does not mean every failed plan was secretly perfect. Some experiences truly cost more than they gave. Wisdom does not need to pretend otherwise, but the outcome does not have to be the only measure of meaning. A path can be unfinished and still teach you how to walk. The resisting mind cannot see this because it is attached to one result. It says, "If I did not receive what I wanted, the whole journey was wrong." This belief makes life smaller. It allows only one form of success. Buddhist wisdom encourages sincere effort without complete attachment to results. You act carefully, prepare fully, and do what you can. Then you recognize that the final outcome depends on many conditions. This does not weaken effort. It removes the belief that your worth is decided by the result. You can fail at a task without becoming a failed human being. You can lose an opportunity without losing your value. You can reach a different destination without declaring the whole journey meaningless. Resistance punishes by turning events into identities. A relationship ends and the mind says, "I am unwanted." A plan fails and the mind says, "I am incapable." A person criticizes you and the mind says, "I am worthless." The event may be painful, but the identity makes the pain permanent. An event belongs to a moment. An identity follows you everywhere. This is why awareness must separate what happened from who you are. You experienced rejection. You are not rejection itself. You made a poor decision. You are not only that decision. You lost something important. You are not a person condemned to lose everything. The mind likes broad conclusions because they create certainty. If it decides, "I always fail," it no longer has to face the uncertainty of trying again. The conclusion hurts, but it protects the mind from risk. This is another form of personal punishment. The mind uses one painful change as evidence against the whole future. It says, "Because this happened, nothing will ever be safe again." The present event becomes a law for every day that follows. But one winter does not prove that spring has disappeared from the world. A painful ending does not describe every possible beginning. Resistance can also hide inside constant complaint. Complaint begins as an expression of discomfort, but it can become a way of refusing to participate in reality. The person repeats what is wrong without asking what response is possible. Each conversation returns to the same dissatisfaction. Nothing changes because the complaint provides emotional movement without practical movement. It feels like action, but it often keeps the person in place. There are situations where speaking about injustice is necessary. Silence can protect harm. Complaints can reveal problems that need correction. But after the problem is clearly named, another question must arise. What can I do now? Can you change the situation? Can you ask for help? Can you create a boundary? Can you leave? Can you adjust your expectation? Can you accept what truly cannot be controlled? Without this question, complaint becomes a circle. It repeats pain without creating direction. The mind may resist action because action carries uncertainty. Complaining allows it to remain morally certain and emotionally familiar. It can say, "This should not be happening," without facing the difficult choices required by what is happening. Acceptance is often misunderstood here. People think acceptance means approval, weakness, or silence. But acceptance is simply a clear recognition of reality. It says, "This is happening." It does not say, "This is good." It does not say, "I will allow harm to continue." It does not say, "I have no feelings about it." Acceptance gives you accurate ground from which to act. You cannot change a situation you refuse to see clearly. If a room is on fire, acceptance means recognizing the fire. You do not waste time shouting that the room should not be burning. You respond. Resistance keeps arguing with the flame. Acceptance looks for the door. This is why acceptance is active rather than passive. It saves energy that would otherwise be spent denying what is already true. That energy becomes available for wise response. You can seek treatment because you accept that the body needs help. You can end a harmful pattern because you accept that love alone has not changed it. You can make a new plan because you accept that the old plan is no longer possible. You can apologize because you accept that your action caused harm. You can rest because you accept that your energy has limits. Resistance delays each of these responses. It says, "This cannot be true," while life continues moving. By the time reality is accepted, more damage may have occurred. The person stays too long, waits too long, argues too long, or ignores the body too long. Then the consequences become another reason for self-punishment. They say, "Why did I not act sooner?" This is where awareness must remain compassionate. Seeing resistance clearly is not an invitation to hate yourself for resisting. Resistance is a human response. The mind often needs time to absorb what has changed. Denial may protect you briefly when a truth is too large to receive all at once. The problem begins when temporary protection becomes a permanent way of living. Do not punish yourself for needing time. Ask whether the time is helping you adjust or helping you avoid. Adjustment slowly moves toward truth. Avoidance keeps rebuilding reasons not to face it. You may not accept everything in one moment. Acceptance can happen in layers. At first, you accept the fact. Later, you accept the emotional effect. Later still, you accept that your life must change because of it. A person may know that a relationship has ended, but not yet accept the loss of the imagined future. They may accept a diagnosis, but not yet accept the new limits it brings. They may accept that a plan failed, but not yet accept that another direction is needed. This gradual process is not hypocrisy. It is the mind learning to hold reality without collapsing. Compassion gives the process room. Awareness keeps it moving. Resistance becomes punishment when the mind demands an explanation for every change. It believes peace will arrive only when it understands why everything happened. Some explanations are useful. They reveal patterns and help prevent repeated harm. But life does not always provide complete reasons. A person may leave without honesty. A loss may arrive without fairness. An opportunity may disappear because of conditions you never saw. A body may change despite careful effort. The mind keeps asking, why? Because why appears to promise control. If it understands the cause, perhaps it can make the world predictable again. Yet some questions remain unanswered. The resisting mind treats this uncertainty as an open wound. It refuses to move until a complete explanation appears. But life may continue without offering one. At some point, peace requires a different question. Not only, why did this happen? But also, how will I live now that it has happened? The first question looks backward for meaning. The second looks forward for response. Both can matter, but the first should not imprison the second. You may never know exactly why someone made a particular choice. You may never understand why one path closed while another remained open. You can still choose dignity, compassion, and clear action. A complete explanation is not always necessary for a complete next step. Resistance also punishes through comparison. Change enters your life, and the mind looks at people who seem untouched by similar difficulty. It says, why is their life easier? Why did they keep what I lost? Why are they moving forward while I remain here? Comparison turns pain into humiliation. It is no longer enough that you are suffering. The mind adds the belief that you are suffering incorrectly or unfairly compared with everyone else. But you see only a small part of another person's life. You see their visible progress, not their private fear. You see the relationship they kept, not the compromises inside it. You see their success, not the conditions that supported it. You compare your inner experience with their outer appearance. This comparison cannot produce clarity. Even when another person truly has an easier condition, resentment does not change your path. It directs attention toward a life you cannot inhabit. Buddhist wisdom does not deny inequality or injustice. Some people face heavier burdens because of circumstances beyond their control. Compassion requires recognizing this. Yet, awareness also asks what attention will serve you now. You can acknowledge unfairness without allowing comparison to consume all your energy. The question remains, given these conditions, what is the wisest step available to me? This returns power without pretending that every person begins from the same place. Resistance often says, I will begin when life becomes fair. But life may never satisfy that condition. Acceptance says, this is not fair, and I will still protect what remains possible. There is great courage in this. It does not excuse injustice. It refuses to let injustice take everything. The mind can also punish itself by believing that acceptance will erase loyalty to what was lost. It fears that if sadness softens, love will appear less real. A person may hold on to pain because pain feels like proof. If I stop grieving, perhaps it means they did not matter. If I enjoy life again, perhaps I am leaving them behind. If I accept the ending, perhaps the relationship meant nothing. This belief keeps the wound open as a memorial. But love does not require permanent suffering. You can remember someone with tenderness without rebuilding the day of loss every morning. You can honor a relationship without refusing every future connection. You can carry gratitude without carrying endless pain. The softening of grief does not reduce the importance of what was loved. It shows that love has found a new form inside you, Pain may have been the first language of remembrance. It does not need to remain the only language. You can remember through kindness, values, stories, choices, and the way you treat others. What mattered can continue as influence rather than injury. Resistance creates punishment when it refuses this transformation. It insists that the only honest connection with the past is suffering. Buddhist wisdom offers another way. It allows memory to become compassion. Because you have lost, you understand the grief of others. Because you have changed, you become less judgmental toward those facing uncertainty. Because life did not follow your plan, you become gentler with people whose lives have also taken unexpected directions. In this way, pain can open the heart instead of closing it. But this transformation requires releasing the question, "Why did life do this to me?" and asking, "What kind of person will I become through meeting this?" The question should not become another demand to find a positive lesson immediately. Some pain needs silence before meaning can appear. You do not need to turn tragedy into inspiration while the wound is fresh. The deeper purpose of the question is to return choice. You may not have chosen the event. You can still influence the qualities with which you meet it. Will the pain make you cruel or compassionate? Will uncertainty make you controlling or attentive? Will loss make you closed or more aware of what matters? These outcomes are not decided in one moment. They are shaped through many responses. Each response can either deepen punishment or create understanding. When anger appears, you can feed the story that life has betrayed you, or you can listen for what the anger is protecting. When sadness appears, you can shame yourself, or you can allow rest and support. When fear appears, you can treat it as a command, or you can examine whether danger is truly present. The emotion becomes a messenger rather than a ruler. Resistance often treats every uncomfortable emotion as a problem to remove. Awareness treats emotion as information that must be understood. Anger may reveal a crossed boundary. Sadness may reveal attachment and loss. Fear may reveal uncertainty or genuine risk. Jealousy may reveal an unlived desire. Guilt may reveal harm or a rule that no longer deserves obedience. When you listen carefully, emotion can guide wise action. When you fight it blindly, the emotion often grows louder. It is like a child who continues knocking because no one has opened the door. Acceptance opens the door and asks, "What are you trying to show me?" This does not mean every feeling tells the truth. Fear can exaggerate. Guilt can come from unhealthy conditioning. Anger can misunderstand another person. The feeling is real, but its first interpretation may not be accurate. Awareness receives the feeling without immediately obeying its story. This space prevents natural emotion from becoming personal punishment. You may feel fear without telling yourself that you are weak. You may feel anger without deciding that the whole world is against you. You may feel grief without believing your future is empty. The feeling moves through a larger field of awareness. Buddhist practice often returns to the breath because the breath reflects this movement. Each breath arrives, remains briefly, and leaves. You cannot keep one breath forever. If you tried to hold it, the very act meant to preserve it would create suffering. Life works in a similar way. Experiences arrive, remain for a time, and change. Joy must be allowed to leave. Pain must be allowed to move. Roles must be allowed to end. New conditions must be allowed to appear. Holding the breath does not prevent change. It only makes change painful. Resistance is the mind holding its breath against life. Acceptance is the slow release. At first, release may feel like loss of control, but what you are losing is not true control. You are losing the constant effort to command what could never be commanded. This effort has exhausted you. You tried to control how others saw you. You tried to control whether someone stayed. You tried to control the timing of success. You tried to control the body's changes. You tried to control whether pain returned. Each attempt placed your peace in the hands of conditions that were never fully yours. The more you tried to control, the more threatened you felt by anything unexpected. Acceptance does not remove all influence. It shows you where influence ends. You can communicate honestly, but you cannot control how another person receives the truth. You can prepare carefully, but you cannot guarantee the result. You can care for the body, but you cannot make it permanent. You can love deeply, but you cannot prevent every separation. You can practice awareness, but you cannot stop every painful thought from appearing. This clear boundary protects energy. You act where action matters. You release where force creates only suffering. This is the heart of the Buddhist middle path. It avoids both helplessness and control. Helplessness says, "Nothing I do matters." Control says, "Everything depends on me." Wisdom says, "My actions matter, and they exist among many changing conditions." This understanding allows effort without obsession. You do what is yours to do, then stop punishing yourself for what was never yours to command. The mind becomes lighter when it no longer interprets every change as a verdict. A closed door is not always proof of unworthiness. A changed relationship is not always proof that love was false. A tired body is not proof that life has lost value. An uncertain future is not proof that disaster is coming. Sometimes a door closes because conditions have changed. Sometimes a relationship completes the form it was able to hold. Sometimes the body asks for a different pace. Sometimes uncertainty is simply empty space, not a hidden punishment. The resisting mind fills empty space with fear because fear is familiar. Awareness leaves space open long enough for reality to reveal itself. This patience changes everything. You stop making permanent conclusions from temporary states. A difficult day is no longer proof of a difficult life. A setback is no longer proof that all progress has vanished. A moment of loneliness is no longer proof that you will always be alone. You allow the moment to be a moment. This is how natural change loses its power to become personal punishment. The rain is allowed to be rain. The ending is allowed to be an ending. The feeling is allowed to be a feeling. You stop turning each experience into a story about your value. There is deep peace in this simplicity. It does not remove grief, but it removes the courtroom surrounding grief. It does not remove disappointment, but it removes the belief that disappointment has judged your entire life. It does not remove uncertainty, but it removes the demand that uncertainty explain itself before you continue. The mind begins resting inside reality instead of fighting beside it. This rest is not laziness. It creates clearer action. When you are no longer spending energy denying the situation, you can see what the situation needs. Perhaps you need to apologize. Perhaps you need to leave. Perhaps you need to wait. Perhaps you need to ask for help. Perhaps nothing can be changed externally, and the work must be the release of an inner demand. The right response becomes easier to recognize when resistance becomes quiet. There may still be sorrow. Acceptance does not always feel peaceful immediately. Sometimes acceptance feels like tears finally arriving. Sometimes it feels like admitting a truth you avoided for years. Sometimes it feels like closing a door with shaking hands. Peace may come later. The first gift of acceptance is not always comfort. It is honesty. Honesty ends the division between what you know and what you keep pretending not to know. That division is exhausting. One part of the mind recognizes that life has changed. Another part keeps behaving as though the old condition will return. You wait, postpone, rehearse, and remain emotionally unavailable to the present. Acceptance brings these divided parts together. It says, "This is where we are now." The sentence may hurt, but it also gives you ground beneath your feet. You cannot walk forward while one foot is still demanding to stand in yesterday. Once both feet enter the present, movement becomes possible. You may not know the destination, You only need to stop punishing yourself for being where life has brought you. You are not weak because change affected you. You are not foolish because you hoped something would last. You are not a failure because a plan ended. You are a human being living in a world where nothing remains fixed. The same impermanence that removes what you love also prevents pain from remaining unchanged forever. This is often forgotten. The mind sees impermanence only as loss, but impermanence also allows wounds to soften, new people to arrive, understanding to grow, and closed hearts to open. Because things change, you are not trapped in one feeling. Because identity changes, you are not condemned to remain the person fear created. Because circumstances change, the present difficulty is not the entire future. Change takes, but it also makes movement possible. Without change, no healing could occur, no child could grow, no lesson could become wisdom, no winter could give way to spring. The mind that refuses change refuses the same law that allows renewal. It wants pain to change while pleasure remains fixed. It wants fear to pass while love never moves. It wants the body to heal without aging and life to improve without leaving anything behind. But change cannot be accepted only when it gives what you want. Wisdom accepts the whole movement. It enjoys beauty without demanding permanence. It meets pain without declaring it eternal. It loves without possession. It plans without worshipping the plan. It grieves without making grief a home. This is not emotional distance. It is a deeper participation in life. You can be fully present because you no longer need the moment to promise forever. You can love today without forcing today to become tomorrow. You can receive what is here while knowing it will change. The mind becomes gentler when it stops using impermanence as evidence that nothing matters. Things matter because they are experienced, not because they last forever. A conversation can matter even if it ends. A relationship can matter even if it changes. A season can matter even if it passes. Your effort can matter even if the outcome differs from your hope. Meaning does not require permanence. When this is understood, change stops feeling like theft. It becomes part of the value of each moment. You listen more carefully because the conversation will end. You care for the body because it is changing. You express love because time is moving. You stop delaying truth because conditions will not remain forever. Impermanence becomes a reason to awaken, not a reason to despair. The mind no longer says, "Because this will end, I should not love it." It says, "Because this will end, I will meet it fully while it is here." This is the opposite of resistance. Resistance refuses the present because it cannot keep it. Awareness receives the present because keeping it was never possible. The punishment begins to end. Here, you stop blaming life for being life. You stop blaming yourself for not preventing the movement of conditions. You stop blaming others for growing beyond the form in which you first knew them. You act where action is needed, grieve where grief is honest, and release where holding has become harm. The world does not become predictable. You become less dependent on predictability. Change does not stop. Your need to interpret every change as a personal attack begins to stop. And in that space, something softens. You understand that life was not always rejecting you. Sometimes it was redirecting you. It was not always taking your identity. Sometimes it was showing that you were larger than one identity. It was not always destroying your plans. Sometimes it was revealing that meaning could take another form. You may not be able to see this during every loss. Some changes remain painful and confusing for a long time. Wisdom does not demand immediate gratitude. It asks only that you do not turn the pain into a permanent judgment against yourself. Let the event be painful without making yourself the punishment. Let the ending be real without making the future empty. Let the emotion rise without making it your identity. Let life change without requiring every movement to explain your worth. This is how resistance begins to loosen. The mind stops adding chains to what is already difficult. It places the second arrow down. It breathes inside the truth. It recognizes that acceptance is not surrendering your life. It is surrendering the useless fight against what has already become real. And when that fight grows quiet, the mind sees the fear beneath it. The fear was not only that life would change, it was that change would carry you so far from your past that the person you once were would no longer recognize who you had become. If this message brought you peace or helped you see change differently, subscribe to the channel and join us for more Buddhist wisdom that can transform your mind and life.